Hello, everyone. Nice to see you on my channel, Touching Stories. Today you will hear an amazing story that is based on real events. It's a drama that will be a very important lesson for everyone.
Alex hated paying with coupons. Lately, it seemed to him that his family could be included in the record book by how often they presented these coupons at the checkout of the economy-controlled supermarket. No, in principle, there was nothing particularly shameful in it, as it were, and many in lean times, especially in their neighborhood, saved with coupons. But personally for Alex, they became the last straw, the last atom, which threatened, figuratively speaking, to black hole the universe of his nervous system. Total, including coupons, the salesman said, that'll be $26.01. Alex sighed and rustled the contents of his wallet. What did he buy? A couple gallons of milk, a package of bacon, peanut butter, more mosquito traps, and so on. Where's his hard-earned money? Hey, Alex. From the tail of the long line, Bill's old acquaintance came out and waved. How's it going? I'm fine, Alex replied with a duty smile. If there was one thing he had learned during his years of living in America, it was to smile, no matter how lousy the reality was in his soul. Buying the lottery? Bill asked. No, Alex dismissed it. And I do, said Bill, who was already known all over the neighborhood. He spent almost $100 every paycheck on all kinds of lotteries, believing that by following his own cleverly devised system Bill taught math at school, he would one day hit the jackpot. Last month, I won a coffee maker and $20. Can you believe that? Muttered Alex. Bill was a strange man, of course, but at least he was lucky to have a wife, Stella, who put up with all his antics. But Naomi, she would have fed him that lottery ticket for dinner. And no, it wasn't that their marriage was on the verge of divorce. She had always been like that. Powerful, tenacious, strict to the point of impossibility. And now Alex just hated himself for putting up with all this in the name of love for more than 20 years. Maybe you'll buy it? A new lottery. The salesman pestered and twirled a bright red ticket under Alex's nose. The grand prize is $10 million. I'd like 12 grand, please. Bill came up from the back of the line again. Alex wanted to tell the salesman to shut up with his intrusive advertising of the lottery, to just give him his unfortunate check and the purchases in the bag. But then he thought once again about how unlucky he was with his wife, and the idea struck him like a thunderbolt. Why not have a mini riot? He'll buy a lottery ticket to spite Yoka and let him do whatever he wants. After all, is he a man or what? Is he the breadwinner of the family or what? Let's have a lottery. Alex waved his hand, and as his mood improved from his own audacity, he waved to everyone in line and in the store within sight and wished them a good day. The Walker family moved to America, to the state of Montana, in the late 90s, just lucky, just won a green card. People they knew at the time were jealous. Alex was terribly proud of the fact that he was a simple guy, yesterday an ordinary factory worker. Today, he could realize the American dream. They left, as they believed, in a fairy tale. They sold the apartment, which Alex lost from his parents when he was a student. They sold the car that Naomi's parents had given him for the wedding. Packed their suitcases, bought phrase books, and let's go. To the sea, to America. And at first, it seemed that everything would be okay just to settle in a new place, not afraid of difficulties. And then there will be a big house with a green lawn in a prestigious area, a red sports car for the head of the family, and a spacious Jeep for the whole family. There will be vacations in Hawaii and Florida. There will be everything that the soul desires. But it turned out, no one was waiting for them there in America. It turned out that there are enough of their own seekers of happiness, and foreigners have twice as hard to achieve. 8 years ago, the Walkers were forced to sell their tiny house in the suburbs ordinary and move to the suburbs of the most suspicious reputation, where they settled not even in a house, but in a trailer. And the neighbors were the same poor people, all lived in the trailer park. Really, it only seemed at first to be a disaster and the end of everything. After all, at first the Walkers thought that in such places lived, well, alcoholics, all sorts of antisocial elements. But then, when they delved into the subject, they found out curious details. It turned out that some trailer parks are very similar to ordinary such mini villages here at each mobile home, which from the outside, due to the competent installation, looked like a normal house. There was a small green lawn and some flowers and bushes. The Walkers were fortunate enough to move into just such a place. Their house had an electric stove, sewerage, hot and cold water. Of course, there were only 2 rooms, one bedroom for the couple and a living room, which also became a nursery for their son Max, or Max as his name was changed. In fact, thanks only to this move and did not find themselves on the street. Paid a month, however, for rent a place under the house, a lot of as much as $500. But we managed. In general, later looking back, Alex realized they were too guided by their foolish dreams and poorly prepared. They were too hopeful that they would be able to pay off the loans. In general, if they had stayed at home, they would have lived at that time much better. When they realized this, it was too late to go back. Approaching his street, Alex slowed down his step and involuntarily admired the landscape beyond the suburbs and outside the city, far away, and at the same time it seemed quite close. The mountains rose to the sky, at this pre-dawn hour colored in gold and purple. The air was filled with the smells of late autumn, permeated with fresh hints of the coming winter. Alex sighed and resolutely sped up his step. Nothing. They had lived another day. Everyone was alive and well, so there was nothing to complain about. There will be macaroni and cheese for dinner, Naomi informed him as soon as he crossed the threshold. Well, okay. Alex shrugged and nodded obediently. They ate macaroni and cheese often, and actually, it was delicious. But lately Naomi had been making it too often, and when he once tried to object, saying, "I'd like to have a variety," there was such a scandal. And it would seem, what's the problem with cooking it yourself? Alex had learned to cook well in his student days. He could fry fish juicy and crispy. He could make a pie with apples and a melting salad herring under a fur coat. But there was only one problem. Naomi. If his wife was in a bad mood, she made scandals about the fact that here, from her hands, the family does not want to eat. Apparently, she cooks very badly. So Alex, at some point, saving the nervous system, stopped getting up to the stove. And it's not a big loss. So he consoled himself. It was always possible to look into a diner, and the Mexican cook there cooked in such a way that you could lick your fingers. Alex even had a secret stash in a secret pocket of his jacket for this purpose. "And Max, has he been away again?" asked the head of the family when his wife put the plates and utensils on the table for 2. Naomi, instead of answering, shook her lips and snorted like a disgruntled and cold horse. How could it be otherwise? If the father can't keep the boy in line. "I see," nodded Alex and sat down. He poked the pasta with a fork. Today his wife was generous and added some vegetables to it, green beans, onions, and zucchini. "What do you understand?" Naomi tightened her lips so that visually they disappeared from her face altogether. Alex cautiously looked up, and although he was both afraid of his wife and pissed her off terribly, he felt sorry for her. Where was his old Naomi, the funny, russet-haired beauty who wore dresses and sang when she washed dishes? Ever since his wife couldn't get a good job as an editor at any publishing house, she'd been replaced. No, she got a job on a fertilizer packaging line for agriculture. And then she also worked at an organic food store. But every year she gave up more and more. She gained weight. She grumbled about it. "I didn't want to lose weight." Wore jeans or Bermuda shorts, shirts or sweatshirts. "I dyed my hair straw yellow, and as long as I had money, I was always buying stuff in the store that was on TV." "It's nothing," he answered with the usual and usually successful phrase to extinguish the incipient conflict, and then returned his attention to the plate with dinner. After dinner, Alex read a classic book, a novel about the life of the working class in Victorian England, and then went to bed. The fact that his son had not come home for the night was still disturbing, but it was no longer terrifying. Because of its ordinariness, Max had been rebelling lately in a way that would have been enough for 4 young sons. The couple fell asleep, as always, on opposite sides of the bed and under separate blankets. The nights, by the way, were getting cooler and cooler, and it was time to think about buying a new heater. The old one was broken. But where to get money if the budget for 2 months in advance is calculated? Coupons for such a large purchase are not enough, and Alex decided tomorrow to talk to his bosses about giving him a salary in advance, and then when they buy, well, they'll get by somehow. As a last resort, we can stop by the food bank. In general, Many neighbors went there regularly and came back with very decent boxes of food. But for Alex, visiting this place was something that seemed impossible to overcome because it seemed to be a marker, a red flashing light bulb, a torch in the night. In short, something that symbolizes that you, brother, have gone down. Naomi, however, did not want to take anything there for another reason. She thought that everything expired and of poor quality was sent there. The morning of the next day started surprisingly well by the time Alex woke up. His wife had already left to take an extra shift in a cleaning company that specialized in cleaning homes, often belonging to wealthy Americans. By the time the head of the family had almost finished his bowl of cornflakes and milk, the front door of the trailer slammed and footsteps were heard. "Hi, Dad," the son said and flopped down on the couch, not even bothering to remove the pile of dirty clothes he had created himself. "Lazy big boy." Alex cursed at his son, but only to himself in his mind, and his hearing said something else. "Son, can we talk?" "Here we go," Max exclaimed and rolled his eyes. "Son, please understand, please, my mom and I are just very worried about you. You're young, your whole life is ahead of you, and I dared to choose with whom to be friends without asking your permission." Max sat down on the couch, sharply frowning. "How many times do I have to say it? My friends are not Satanists or maniacs, just rockers and free individuals, and I already graduated from high school this year. What more do you want from me?" Out of everything, Alex could agree with his son only in the last thing. Those guys were really free. Mostly they were all from not very prosperous families, so they went on crooked paths. Alex was convinced that decent people, they would not ride motorcycles in dubious places to get by with casual, and maybe there are different rumors and criminal earnings, to shout like crazy at concerts with this strange, rattling music. Yes, Alex was one of those who recognized the music in the first place, the old Soviet pop music, and all this rock, rap, and the like considered a bad tone. And what only to do with you?" sighed the head of the family. "Leave alone." Max, jumping up and picking up his jacket, flew to the front door. "It seems that I have no place in my own house." "Oh yes, what am I talking about?" The guy made an exaggeratedly surprised face. "I almost forgot we live in a trailer like white trash. And you," now he was looking at his father contemptuously. "You and your mother trying to tell me how to live my life. You couldn't build your own life, so you're trying to screw mine up for company. Fuck you." To the Mexican border, Max finished censoriously, but with the opposite implication, and jumped out of the house and slammed the door so hard that all the walls shook. Alex, also on the verge, rushed after him. What a bastard. But then he got a pain in his lower back so badly that it even bent. And so, of course, he didn't catch up with him. I only saw how the son jumped on his motorcycle wreck, bought with the money he had been saving for 3 years, and drove away, leaving behind him a column of dust and the aftertaste of the fact that he, in fact, and right, what kind of parents are they? So, losers who can only set a bad example. In such a disgusting mood, Alex went to work. He was lucky to get a job at a furniture warehouse. Having come to work, Alex said hello to everyone, changed into a uniform, gray overalls, and was about to climb on the forklift, a huge machine, which, however, he quickly learned to control, as he was called by a velvety female voice. "Jennifer." Alex smiled, and how could he not smile at Jennifer, the yesterday's student, who worked here as a secretary, while sending questionnaires to modeling agencies, was loved by everyone here. Stately, hair like a raven's wing, sensual makeup, and such a short skirt wears. In general, hold on, that single and married men. And Jennifer also had a light and a little walk character. True, she walked not for nothing, and for a bouquet of flowers, Bano Benevolent was not preferred gifts expensive. No, she didn't behave in such a way that anyone could call her a girl of the oldest profession. But yes, she had the potential, judging by the way Jennifer chose her lovers. She handed him a tablet to sign. "I'll sign," nodded Alex. Actually forgot to sign the explanatory note about the fact that he had seen crates with fragile contents tumbling down from one rack, not because he was a clumsy forklift driver, but because they had been stacked unsteadily in the first place. Thanks to this report, by the way, Alex could count on a full paycheck, and they believed him and didn't fine him. "How are you?" he asked out of politeness. "Great. Jennifer replied and blew a bubble of their chewing gum. It smelled like strawberries, and the girl was also wearing a leopard-colored blouse with an unashamedly deep neckline. No matter how much Alex tried to keep love and respect for Naomi and himself, he looked at his colleagues' charms, and so sad, here, to the pinching pain in his soul sometimes became from the fact that his train left home, no beautiful wife, no banal respect from his spouse, and someone will get such a beautiful Jennifer, and it'll probably be a man with money. The working day dragged on, and when it was over, Alex could hardly believe it. He wanted to go home already and just fall asleep. His legitimate few hours of peace and rest, and tomorrow to work again, and then again, and then again, and again, until the very end, as long as there would be strength to move his legs and lift his arms, because Alex had already calculated everything, and it turned out that with their family credit bondage and regular obligatory payments, it would be impossible to be idle in retirement. It would be necessary to work, and certainly one should not count on the fact that his son would grow up and support him financially. If they don't put him in jail in the next few years, he'll be happy. Already changing from his work clothes into his own, Alex suddenly found a piece of paper in his pocket. He took it out and recognized it. Remembered that yesterday he had bought a lottery, and the drawing took place this morning. Should I check it out? See if they won $100. He could check the results in the newspaper, and having bought it on his way home, Alex started comparing the numbers, and at first he thought he was wrong. His heart sank into his heels. He checked it again, and now he was just shocked, because he had hit the jackpot. Leaning against his bike, Max looked at his friends in the distance. They were sitting around the fire, talking about something funny, judging by the bursts of laughter. And he was off to the side where dusk had fallen to blackness and where they had left all their bikes. Max stood with his arms folded across his chest and thought about his life. In general, this didn't happen to him very often, and he hated it. But sometimes the thoughts wouldn't let go. He had been born here in America, so he couldn't understand his parents' stories about another life. And when he did, when he was younger, he was angry why they had left everything there. There was an apartment, some position in society. They could buy all the food they wanted in the store, and said that he would have studied in a good school there, would have entered university. But becoming a teenager, Max began to cut off such conversations. What's the use of grieving about the abandoned if it does not help the present? He grew up with the feeling of the gap between his reality and the way he wanted to live. Yes, there was an option to become an excellent student, get a scholarship, and go to college. But no matter how hard Max tried to study well, it did not work. And there could be no indulgences for achievements in sports either, because he was the worst in it. The only thing he was brilliant at was repairing motorcycles. So after high school, he got a part-time job at an auto repair shop, and he was losing hope that he could get into a college for free. Hi, Stewart appeared out of nowhere next to Max, and Max immediately looked up, squared his shoulders. Stewart wasn't an easy guy. People like him don't usually hang out with white trash. They didn't know much about Stewart, but there was no doubt that he was from a family of rich people, those who had separate houses for summer vacations on the East Coast. Stewart had the coolest, trickiest motorcycle. He wore only black clothes and lots of genuine leather. His ears were pierced, his lips and belly button often exposed by short and ripped t-shirts. Stewart was 22 years old, so he had a bonus. enough money to buy fish and chips and coffee when he got off the ship. He'd been working since he was 10, selling newspapers at 14, and by 40 he owned the largest ranch in Texas. Max rounded his eyes before Stewart had never been frank with any of them. So, you see, the Brimmet continued, looking thoughtfully toward the mountains. My grandfather and father already had everything for a successful start by default. He fell silent and Max just stood beside him. It seemed that they just listened to the silence together. Somewhere very, very far away, some animal roared. Max didn't know who it was, maybe a bear, maybe a puma. Understand these sounds of wild nature if you are not a nerdy nerd. What about you? Did you have everything? He finally decided to break the silence. I did. But then my mother died and my father remarried. 4 years ago, he got divorced and she ripped him off. He beat her. And that's why the judge let her take the Maxim. I see, nodded Max, though he actually had even more questions. It was very strange. Perhaps it was the effect of this unusually cold night for the area and the deafening loneliness of being estranged from his own family. But it seemed to him that he and Stewart had known each other for 100 years, and that he could be trusted like no one else. We had one uncle in our family. His name was Jeffrey, and he was cut out of the will after he squandered the money entrusted to him for the business. Was it the woman's fault again? Max suggested. No, Stewart turned and his eyes flashed like those of a wild beast. But it certainly showed. He was obsessed with gold. You've heard of how settlers from east to west sometimes stashed gold in the mountains, hoping to come back for it later. They were afraid they'd be robbed on the way or when they first got to California. Max nodded. He remembered something like that. At school, the teacher was just obsessed with the stories of the first settlers. But I guess she was crazy because she loved to tell all sorts of stories, like caravans stranded in the mountains during the winter, whose inhabitants were slowly going mad from hunger and the realization that they were doomed because even the most experienced rescuers couldn't get to them until spring. My uncle believed there was gold here too. Stewart nodded at the tops of the mountains, which looked like ghostly giants wrapped in black, frozen in the light of the lazy rising moon. My father wanted me to be a lawyer. My mother insisted on a banking career, and my stepmother, she just liked me, if you know what I mean. Max understood, and his eyes widened. I mean, she seduced you. The day after I turned 18, she came to my place. She offered me a cocktail. After the first few sips, I blacked out. I don't think there was anything between us. Stewart grinned wryly. But my dad caught us in bed. That's when he beat her up. He kicked me out. But why did she do it? I guess she just wanted to. And while I was drinking that cocktail, she implied that we could split everything my father owned between the two of us. I suppose if I had been more cooperative and gone to her after we were caught, she would have shared some of the loot with me. Why didn't Dad tell you what happened? No, hitting women is disgusting, but she was asking for it. I didn't want to embarrass myself, Stewart said without a chuckle. And you didn't tell him what it was really like. I did. He didn't believe me. The only thing I have left is my grandfather's trust fund. I'm 22 now. When I turn 25, I'll be able to manage his funds. That was the terms of my grandfather's will. They were silent again for a while. Max didn't know what had prompted Stewart, the enigmatic, soft-spoken, stiff guy who gave everyone the impression of a mysterious wanderer, to be so frank, but he appreciated it. There was something about it, something that gave hope that they were friends now. When I left home, Jeffrey was the only one of my family who took me in. It just so happened that let's just say I didn't live up to the family's expectations. We didn't have any scientists in our family. I decided to become an archaeologist and a historian. Max rounded his eyes. Stewart couldn't be imagined in a cubicle life. So boring. Jeffrey was diagnosed with laryngeal cancer a year ago, stage 4. He died 6 months ago. He fought a long battle. I'm sorry, Max swallowed hard. I've taken a sabbatical, and before I go back to university, I want to finish what my uncle started. He had a dream, and at least it doesn't have to die. Why are you telling me all this? The question came out of my mouth. Because you seem like a guy I can trust. Stewart smiled, and his hand, his fingers ringed with skulls and skewed wolf faces, dropped to Max's shoulder. You're like me when I was younger, and I think we can help each other. Okay, nodded Max. I'll help. But you don't even know what it's about yet. Stewart squinted. What if I want to become a drug lord? Not you. Max grinned. You're definitely not one of the bad guys. That's a bold statement. A hand off my shoulder. I wish you didn't regret it. Well, shall we get back to the others? Stewart pointed to the boys and girls of the 8 men sitting around the fire, chatting merrily, carefree about something. We'll talk about our business later. It's a serious subject and will need time and attention. And I'm sorry I'm acting like an older brother who was left to babysit, but you're already pecking your nose. Max agreed. And he also thought that if he really had such an older brother, his life would be much better. Today was the one day when Alex didn't think he was a fool. No, today he thought he was a genius and the luckiest man alive. At lunch, he had asked to leave work and told his boss that he had a stomach ache. Apparently, the filling of the burrito he had eaten for lunch was stale. The boss took pity and let him go for a few hours. He said he would go to the pharmacy and take something. And he ran as fast as he could to the law office. So that consultation was expensive, and for free one had to sign up in advance. But today fortune was definitely on his side, because Alex managed to cut into a small live queue for a consultation with lawyers who came to town for a while. They were newcomers from a large law firm who were sent here to, so to speak, flaunt charity-free services for the residents of a town full of poor people. And so, squirming in his chair with excitement, Alex shared what had happened. A blonde lawyer in a black and white suit listened to him carefully. No, the only option in your case is to keep the winnings from your wife. So you have to share everything? He asked, and the mood went downhill. Alex came here because he knew that everything that spouses gained in marriage should be divided in half. And he didn't want to add a fat jackpot to the modest gain. But he was also afraid that then it would be worse, so he decided to ask advice from a specialist. And if I prove that I bought it with my salary, he muttered, my hard-earned money, what does she have to do with this? Mr. Walker, the girl sighed patiently. If you decide to collect your winnings after the divorce, I'm afraid you risk losing everything. And she told him about the case. There was such a cunning man. He did so and decided for the fact that he cheated his wife in general, all to give her, that is, and his half of the winnings. Nightmare, Alex muttered. Outrage, he added indignantly. What in the world is going on? Mr. Walker, the lawyer looked at him carefully. In general, this is beyond the scope of my work, but I advise you to contact a financial advisor. He will help you decide what to do with the winnings. Unfortunately, there are many cases when lottery winners. Only, Mr. Walker, don't be offended. But there are many instances where they lose everything they've won very quickly by making reckless spending. And also, I recommend you to keep confidentiality. Do not tell about the winnings of relatives, neighbors, colleagues, or friends. Again, there are many cases when, I get it. Alex grinned grimly, interrupting her. Many cases when everyone wants to suck on other people's money. Well, I know that. I've been living with such a leech myself for years. Well, thank you. And if you want, I will help you choose a lawyer for full support in all your cases, the girl added. Thanks, I'll think about it. Alex got up, shook her hand goodbye, and left the office and the whole building. So, that's how it is. So we'll have to share. Though, how I didn't want to do that. But on the other hand, he thought he would still have almost $5 million left. That would be enough to recover from the divorce. Alex went back to work, smiling at his fantasies about a snow-white yacht on which he would sail to Hawaii, taking for a pleasant company of beautiful models. $3,000 is the minimum. Alex walked down the street, clutching the lottery ticket tightly in his pocket. Honey, we've become millionaires. Alex realized it wasn't the best phrase. It was the worst way to explain to his spouse how their life had changed overnight. He wanted to do something different and start from afar, to sit down and talk to Julia carefully, calmly about everything, to remember together how young they were and what hopes and dreams they shared, to remember that once they really loved each other. He wanted to propose to solve everything peacefully. Yes, the initial impulse was dashing. Naomi, go wherever you want, and my half of the winnings would be enough for me. But the closer Alex approached the house, the more greed possessed him. Why half? If it is possible and more. For this, it was necessary to persuade his wife that there was no need to divorce. We could stay together. After all, now there was a second chance for their family. Alex believed that if Naomi agreed that the money, respectively, as before, would be managed mainly by him, and therefore he would be able to take something from the half that theoretically would be due to his wife. No, Alex realized that she would also have access to the money, but not like in a divorce. And as for the modeling beauties, well, they could wait. He'd just go on vacation one day, alone. They have different vacation tastes anyway. But instead of a calm, planned conversation, Alex barely entered, and as he saw his wife, she sat at the table and cut out coupons, and fell out. "Honey, we're millionaires." Naomi put aside the paper and scissors and looked at him like he was crazy. "It's not funny. Everything at the laundromat went up in price. You bought milk that was almost expired. I think there are rats under the house. And our son is still tangling with these criminals. You have the nerve to make jokes." "I'm not joking." Alex slapped a lottery ticket on the table and a torn sheet from the printed press where the results of the drawing were published. "Here, see for yourself." Naomi looked at him as if he were not just a madman, but already dangerous. She snorted mockingly, but she put on her glasses and started to check this and that. Then she raised a puzzled look at Alex, and then suddenly threw herself on his neck. "That can't be true." "Maybe." He grinned and gently patted his wife on the back. "Maybe." "Oh, how can it be? You have never bought." "I decided to," Alex answered embarrassedly, and a strange warmth flooded his chest. "I don't feel well," he said, grimacing at the pain in his heart. Alex, Naomi, supporting him so that he leaned on her, led him into the bedroom. "Put him on the bed." She frantically searched for heart drops. "Mom, Dad." 10 minutes later, my son's voice came out. "I'd like some money. My sneakers are torn. They're ruined." Alex was still lying on the bed, but he was afraid to move. Naomi held his hand and looked at him sympathetically. But when she heard her son, she pressed her lips together and sniffled. And then she screamed loudly, "Will you calm down or not? You think we're printing money here? Get some glue and seal it up. Other people are working at your age, and all you know is that you're hanging around with bums. You're one to talk." From behind the bedroom door. "We live like bums ourselves, and it's not my fault. And I work. And it's my business that I don't work full-time. And if you're so smart, if you work, then buy your own sneakers." Naomi parried. "Don't fight, please," Alex begged. "It's bad enough as it is. If you don't like the way you live, then take and clean up." Naomi shouted to her son, "You've made a pigsty. Your wife will be poor. Dad's not well, and he's—" "Dad, what happened?" In a moment, Max looked into the bedroom, disheveled and sincerely worried. "Is it his heart again? Do we need an ambulance? How are we going to pay the ambulance?" Naomi shrieked. $3,000 minimum will charge for the call and transportation to the hospital. Do I look like a millionaire?" Max blushed his face, but did not answer his mother, and for that Alex was sincerely grateful to his son. "Okay, I'll clean up now," he said and went out. Naomi continued to sit next to him, holding her husband's hand. "Let's tell him." "Don't be direct right now," she waved him away. "Let him suffer. He's our son. I know, I gave birth to him myself." Naomi replied, "We'll tell him. We'll have a family dinner tonight and tell him." She smiled. "I found a coupon for chicken. I'll roast it for dinner." "Hang in there," Alex grinned. "Soon we won't have coupons anymore. We'll live like kings." About half an hour later, Alex, despite his wife's warnings, got up and said that he was not a grandfather to lie around all day long. But then he decided not to get too heavy and agreed, while his wife was busy with dinner, to rest a little more. "I'll go to the store myself," said Naomi, who was already packing her purse. "So, where are the coupons?" "Hey you!" She turned to her son, who was still at home, but after his mother's angry shouts, he sat quiet as a mouse. "There were coupons here. Where did you put them?" "I thought it was just trash on the table." Of course it was trash. She had her hands in her sides. "I cleaned the whole kitchen this morning. I found all the candy wrappers you always forget to throw out. So I threw out all the trash I could find." "You took it all out?" Max snapped at me. "Vaughn even finished the dishes and swept the floor." "Mom, why are you throwing yourself at me? I do not smoke, do not drink, do not take anything. I don't want you to do any of those things. I would have you then. Naomi waved her hands, but suddenly she stopped. Wait a minute. There was a little red piece of paper on the table. There was a ticket here. I didn't see any tickets, Max shrugged. What ticket? Are you going to the movies? Where? Everything. What? You? Cleaned up? Naomi asked, breathing heavily and separately. I told you I picked up the trash and threw it out. What's wrong, Mom? Are you sick too? You? Naomi slumped down, and it was lucky there was a chair, or she would have fallen on the floor. You threw away $10 million, she added, pointing her finger at her son. You threw away a lottery ticket your father bought, you idiot. Why did I give birth to you? Mom, the young man grabbed his head. Mom, I'll be right back. The garbage truck is still. I don't think it's here yet. I don't think so. Naomi roared, jumping up and rushing out the door. What's wrong? Asked Alex, who looked out of the bedroom and at first thought that his wife and son were just arguing about something again. But when he realized that his tone was raised to the level of a hurricane, he was distracted from watching the TV show. I accidentally threw away the ticket. I'll find it, Max said, running out of the house after his mother. Alex thought that his heart was aching again, that it would stop right now. But what heartish when you can lose $10 million. So he ran after his family. Stop! Stop! Gasping on the run, Alex shouted because the garbage man was ready to tip their tank into the car. Stop! Panting, he bent over with his hands and his knees. Our trash. Excuse me, sir. The garbage man put the tank back in place. Is there a problem? Alex managed to outrun his wife and son. They ran after him. We accidentally threw away my letter of reply from the university. Max blurted out. So we're taking the trash away. We'll look for it. Well, I see, shrugged his shoulders and just got into the cab of the garbage truck and drove away. And the family dragged the tank to their house to look for a ticket. Luckily, it turned up on top of a tangled banana peel. Alex, shaking with pleasure, carefully held it in his hands and then went and put it away in the safest place, where they also kept a stash for a rainy day, that is, in an envelope, which was kept in an album with family photos, quite old from the times of youth. We're almost poor again. Naomi shook her hands and then laughed. What a story. And now, parents, turning the chair backwards, Max saddled up. Explain to me what's going on. Upon hearing everything, Max, contrary to Alex's expectations, didn't react very violently, just nodded and said that it certainly makes a big difference. Can I go to a normal college then? Finally, hesitantly asked. What kind of question, son? Alex said, you'll study in the Ivy League, among the elite. We'll see about that. Naomi pressed her lips together. If the behavior is normal. Wife, what are you talking about, huh? Alex rounded his eyes. What are you doing? It's nothing. Naomi folded her arms across her chest. It's just that people work hard all their lives, and someone, you see, expects to get everything ready to go. But what happened to us? We get these millions for nothing. Alex really couldn't understand his wife's logic. You know, Mom, and some people are only spoiled by money, said Max with a bad squint. Don't give me anything for nothing, or I'll become like you. With these words, the guy just ran out of the house, habitually slammed the door. The glass in the window tinkled pitifully. You shouldn't do that, sighed Alex. You haven't gotten anything yet, but how? It's your own child. I just don't want him to grow up selfish. So I'm going to the store. I still need to get these millions, and today I have to live on something. My husband hasn't learned how to earn money for 20 years. Alex was alone, and he felt sad. And he called himself a fool because he believed at some point that big money in the family would change something for the better. And they had not even had time to be in his hands yet, and they had brought a new discord. Max, putting his hands in the pockets of his jacket and pulling the hood of his sweatshirt over his head, stomped down the street. Yeah, and this is his own mother? It would be better to be an orphan than with such a mom. In general, he often thought about how he could have a good life if he were rich. And now, it would seem that he was lucky enough. But what happened in the end? The guy grinned unhappily, remembering that he had once heard that some millionaires bring up their children in austerity and economy. For example, They themselves fly first class and children economy. No money to go, child. Work in a diner to buy new sneakers. Max snorted under his nose. He knew exactly what if. No, not like that. That when he himself became rich, his children would have the best of everything. They wouldn't need anything. And he would spoil his wife. That's the right thing to do. Right now, his friend was waiting for him. He and Stewart had arranged to meet him at a pizza place. Sorry, I'm late, Max said, sitting down at the table. Parents again. If only as again. He took off his hood, ran it through his hair, trying to smooth it out, but he shook it even more, and then he went and told me about the winnings. Stewart reacted with an arched eyebrow and a slight chuckle. Hang on, it's going to get worse, but in principle, you can turn things in your favor. Purely legally, you're entitled to your piece of the pie. Really? Max is tense. Theoretically, probably, but what about getting other money? Even more, and it'll all be yours alone. And mine. We'll split it fairly 50-50. Max sipped the milkshake that had just arrived along with the hot, fresh out of the oven chicken and pineapple pizza. No, he trusted Stewart, but the offer sounded ambiguous. Are you suggesting something criminal? Or were you just joking about it at the time? Would you have said yes if I'd asked you? I don't know, Max looked away. I'm sick of it. I can't take it anymore. No, it's legal, but it's classified, and it could really make us both rich. Literally. And Stewart started talking. Turns out Uncle Jeffrey had spent his life researching the history of one group of settlers. Among them was a man named Ben Miles. He was moving to California like everyone else for a better life, but he also had a lot of capital to support it. And according to his diary entries before he set out, he converted that capital not into the cattle were not destined to come true, that winter was particularly harsh, and in the spring the search party found only the skeletons of the settlers. In Ben's diary, as well as his last letter, only the weather and time spoiled the records, and nobody could make out the exact landmarks of the place where the gold was hidden. But they kept looking for it. Over time, the story came to be seen as a legend. But Uncle Jeffrey was convinced of its reality, and before his death told everything he knew to Stewart, and also gave him all the results of his years of work. How much gold is there? Max asked in a whisper. 150 million. Stewart replied in a mysterious whisper and winked. But. Max was getting excited. Why did you choose me? Don't you need some historians, archaeologists to help you? You know, the last few years have made me look at life differently. In principle, it's always easier to work as a team, but you can do it alone. And besides, I don't want to share my success with just anyone. And you, believe it or not, you're the first person I can call my friend. But we haven't known each other that long. So, there's something about you, some kind of energy, maybe? Stewart smiled. You're a good guy, Max, and why not share that gold with you? So, what do you say? Are you with me? I'm with you. Max had made his final decision. Yes, it all sounded fantastic. But now, on the eve of adulthood, when do you make a big change? And even if there was nothing to be found, it would be his adventure. Max is just tired of living like his parents, to follow a predetermined, safe, and predictable path. He decided to take a risk, and now he felt stronger and more inspired than ever. Hi, I heard you were sick. Are you feeling better? Alex almost jumped up. He was just setting up in the staff room with his usual hamburger for a snack. And then Jessica walked up to him. Hi, yeah, better. Thank you. Poor thing, she said, twirling a curl around her finger. Jessica was especially good today, wearing jeans so low-slung that they exposed her thigh bones, and a scarlet strapless knit top. A doll, in a word. I hear you're a lucky guy, she smiled broadly. What? Alex didn't understand, distracting himself from the hamburger again. No reason. They say you won the lottery. What? Who says that? Alex rounded his eyes, and that was bad, very bad. Bill's got something wrong. Did he? Jessica squinted slyly, like a fox, smelling at chicken, not in feathers, but already roasted. That's right, I didn't win anything. What about you? Do you have any other questions for me? No, I just came to check on your health, she winked at him. It's a shame that such a charming man is so unhappily married. She didn't explain why she had such an opinion about his marriage and just left. And Alex was left to finish his cold hamburger. He caught Bill as soon as they saw each other and pulled him aside between the shelves. "Why are you spreading gossip? What are you talking about?" Bill rounded his eyes because he was a little frightened by the pressure of his acquaintance grabbing him by the shirt. "That I won the lottery." "You didn't?" "No, of course not." Alex really hoped that his voice sounded convincing. "But I saw you all dragging the trash can. And oh, don't give me that letter to my son bullshit. What college? He's barely out of high school. What else would you be so eager to find in a trash can? A letter from the IRS. So, come on, did you win?" "Well, I won." Alex let go of Bill's shirt and looked down. "I'm just scared to talk about it, and we didn't get anything." "How much?" Bill's eyes were glistening greedily. "I should have gotten that ticket myself. You're new at this, aren't you? Beginner's luck." "Big money," Alex sighed. "It's even scary to think about the amount of money we'll have on our hands, given our current situation." "How much?" $12,000, sighed Alex even more heavily. After some silence, Bill reacted. "Not bad, and I thought you hit the jackpot. And why would I keep going to work then?" Alex waved his hands. "I would have quit the same day. We would live on the stash until we get the winnings. And so, even offended, all the money will go on loans and debts. Well, maybe we'll have some left over. Maybe we'll go on a weekend vacation somewhere near here on the lake. Maybe," he finished and finally looked at Bill. And he realized he believed him. Alex was a man not used to intrigue and lie, but right now he was ready to believe himself. "What are you doing here?" Tom, one of the bosses, looked between the racks. "Do you think forklifts can work by themselves?" We're going. Alex waved away and finally exhaled with relief. It seems that their secret was still a secret. On the way home, Alex realized that a couple of days had been spent on thinking. It's nothing, but there was nothing to drag out further. So having returned home, he informed his family that perhaps it was time to send the ticket to the office of the company, where the organization, the creator of the lottery, was located. "How about taking it in person?" "That's more reliable," Naomi suggested. "I know, but it's very far away. Let's do it by letter." "Well, and call them, of course," said Alex. And immediately, without delay, dialed the right number. They answered quickly, listened attentively, and asked to dictate the ticket number and some other information. They confirmed that it was a winning ticket and congratulated him. They told me how to send the ticket and told me to take a picture with it at home. But most importantly, they said that in just a few days you can come to the office for the money. Alex did everything he needed to do, literally the next day. It was a day off, and he decided to walk around the city a little. Not that he didn't want to go home, but he was in the mood for a walk and a think. His feet carried him to the center, and suddenly, at first Alex thought that he was mistaken and also thought that there are coincidences in the world. A woman who looked like his wife, but only prettier, came out of the beauty salon. Her hands were full of bags, and not ordinary store bags, but such paper, stylish, in which things from expensive stores are usually packed. But then he squinted his eyes and, "Naomi, you." He was speechless. Yes, it was her own wife, but how she had changed. First of all, she had changed her color into a cool blonde and her hair shone like silk. Secondly, usually she did not wear makeup, but now her lips were highlighted with scarlet lipstick and her eyes with smoky shadows. It was beautiful, bright, youthful. But Naomi also seemed more aggressive this way. And where are the usual jeans and knitwear? Now her wife was wearing a light dress and heeled boots and a gold pendant around her neck, plus earrings. And Alex remembered exactly that all the gold had been pawned a long time ago. But could it be costume jewelry? However, some suspicions, vague such thoughts began to rumble in his head. "Well, there," said the wife, embarrassed, and fixed her hair. "I decided that since I'm a millionaire now, it's time to change." "You'll," Alex swallowed hard. "Where did you get the money from? We've only got to go to get the winnings, haven't we?" "What are you? Where from?" "Oh, come on." The wife waved away and pouted her lips capriciously. Alex didn't like that look on her face at all. Jessica would have been allowed it because she was young and beautiful. And his Naomi, well, she should have recognized that she had to stop being young. What's with all the wiggling and the bright lips and the deep cleavage? Yes, I borrowed it, she added nervously. And where did they give it to you? Alex asked thoughtfully. He was not a fan of shopping and even less of beauty salons, but he could estimate very roughly that the whole appearance of his wife and the contents of the bags cost a lot. And to borrow, by the way, it is unclear who borrowed wealthy acquaintances of the Walkers did not have. Well, you know, the wife was very suspicious. I decided that Pedro could help. I told him that we would have the money later and he borrowed. Pedro. Alex's exclamation startled the pigeons, who were scattering on the pavement looking for crumbs, and the passers-by who were walking nearby looked at him as if he were crazy. Are you out of your mind? The thing was, Pedro was the name of one, a man with a dark reputation. He ran a weird bar and nightclub where they sold rumored booze and other stuff that could get you in big trouble with the police. And there also worked strippers, very cheap girls. And there were regular fights, and, in general, they said about Pedro that he was a kind of mafioso, but too scumbag and stupid at the same time to be a real gangster. And until today, Alex didn't realize that he was married to a woman who had enough brains. No, it's more accurate to say, who had no brains at all, because she thought to borrow money from Pedro, and even to tell him about winning the lottery. Say it's a bad joke, Alex felt his eyelids start to twitch. Well, I'm sorry, his wife pressed her lips and quickly, Maxley became like her former self, dissatisfied with everything in the world and her husband in the first place, Yulka. You? I have no words. Alexa grabbed his head. We are going to go the day after tomorrow. Couldn't you wait a couple of days and then spend your money? Not a couple, the wife pouted. Now Naomi was almost crying. You go to the office with the ticket, there, take a picture. And to get the winnings, it will take weeks. So what? Alex was indignant. Couldn't you do without all this stuff? He waved his hands, as if describing with gestures the image of his wife and her purchases. Couldn't you live without this stuff? For some time, the couple stood opposite each other in menacing silence. Alex was shocked by the deed of his other half. Naomi was boiling in burning resentment, but finally, each of the parties managed to overcome their feelings. Okay, I'll go to the stores and return everything. Just, Naomi smiled and rubbed her eyes. Her mascara was smeared. You can't go back to the beauty parlor. No way. Alex waved his hand, but without anger. Leave your rags. But as soon as we get the winnings, we'll return every cent to Pedro. Deal? And then we can get out of here. Leave? Where? Why? Why do you say that? What about me? What about my opinion? Like your wife is a fishing rod. Wherever you want to go, there you go. Naomi gibbered, walking next to Alex. Yuck, it's heavy. Give me a hand. What a man. His wife is pulling heavy things, and he doesn't care. Alex swallowed the phrase that she bought it all and was going to carry it home alone, and even scraped up enough patience and mental harmony to explain what he said. Yes, he thinks it's best for them to move to another city where they can start over. The winnings are great, but you have to handle that kind of money all the more carefully. You'd have to buy a house, that's one thing. Then, of course, to pay for your son's education, that's two. Still need to put yourself in savings for retirement time. Well, and for life, you can try to open a business. I wanted to go on a cruise to the Caribbean, Naomi said, and Alex had the impression that she had missed everything he said. We'll see, Alex said. Maybe we could go. Yeah, we could, I guess. The whole family. They drove the rest of the way to their street in silence. And then, Alex rounded his eyes because their son's motorcycle slowed down at one of the trailer houses and Jessica jumped off it. She gave Max a familiar gesture of a kiss on the cheek, then ran up the steps and into her house. Are you out of your mind? Alex attacked his son, who was calmly walking along the road, pushing the motorcycle next to the Walker's house. That's right, Naomi supported him. Yes, it's a girl. Don't you think it's a little late to teach me? I'm of age, Max snapped at her. What kind of an adult are you? You're still a lazy bum. And then you won't even get a drink at the bar. Does Jessica look like a beer? His son asked with a mocking tone. She looks like, Naomi started to say, but stopped under her son's hard stare. "Shut up," he said. "Shut your mouth. You have no right to say anything about my life." "Son, Naomi stopped in shock. "How do you talk to your mother?" Alex swung at his son. "And as you brought me up, so I communicate." Max dodged. "You know what? I'm sick of it. You reproach me with the fact that I'm not an excellent student, with the fact that I'm not like you see. What? You can't stand the fact that I'm still living with you. And you know what? I'm leaving home today. That's it. I'll be independent as you wanted." Having said that, Max saddled the motorcycle, pressed the gas, and in the next moment disappeared behind the street corner. "Son," Naomi whispered after him, and then cried. "Nothing." Alex swallowed hard. "Nothing. He'll get over it and come back. Don't worry." "Where will he go?" "Will he go to his friends? He'll get bored in a couple of days. He'll run back to a clean house, home-cooked food." "Nothing. He's still young. We'll mind our own business, won't we?" he asked. Naomi nodded, sniffing her nose, and they went home. Alex had been a parent for too long not to know that even if it seems that your child is away from you forever, it is almost certainly necessary to give him some time to realize his mistakes, but at least to try to return to the family. Max endured exactly 24 hours and curled up the next day exactly in time for dinner. "Dad, I was just, anyway, speaking," stomping around the doorstep. "Okay, don't talk philosophy to me here," Alex said sternly, though he wanted to laugh and tell the boy that he might have grown physically, but he was still a fool in some places. "Mom fried the chicken again. Apologize, just quickly. Then wash your hands and go to the table. Got it?" "Got it," Max answered and slipped past his father into the trailer. His and Naomi's voices were heard. Then the faucet opened in the bathroom and the sound in the trailer was fantastic. And finally, we sat down to dinner. We decided to take the bus to the next town. We decided that Naomi and Alex, as the main ticket holders, wouldn't have to go. "Can I leave you alone for a couple of days?" Alex asked his son. "Won't you make a mess at home?" "I won't," Max answered. And his eyes were the most honest because he was not going to do anything at home. And as for his plans about things outside the house, the street, and even the whole city, his parents didn't say anything about it. They weren't supposed to know about it at all. Max believed that first, he was old enough to make such decisions on his own, and second, that he had an adult friend and protector, his mentor Stewart. "What do we tell people, the neighbors?" Naomi wondered. "Why should we tell them anything? Why should we tell them anything?" Alex was indignant. "But you said yourself that the lawyer said that we need this confidentiality. If it's so necessary, then let's say that we went to the dentist. Because in another city, my acquaintance, he is a dentist," out loud thought out a realistic version for all curious Alex. "And he is ready to give us a discount on filling. Here, how it fits." "And you, Dad, are just a master of lies," smiled Max. "You just don't get used to lying." He sent his son a serious look. And then everyone got down to dinner without talking. Moreover, Naomi was in such a good mood that she even let her husband into the kitchen and he baked an apple pie. The next morning we left. They took a bus to the desired city without any adventures. As soon as they got off the bus, Alex went into his bag and handed his wife a voluminous scarf and sunglasses. The same things, plus a cap, he got for himself. "What's that for?" "Disguise. You want to shine your face in front of all the gawkers? You think we're gonna get a bunch of reporters out there?" Naomi gasped. "Because we're lottery winners?" "Oh, I'm wearing makeup like I'm going to the market." Alex only shook his head and said that they should hurry up. He didn't show it, but he was really nervous. However, contrary to expectations, neither on the street in front of the business center, nor in the office of the company organizer of the lottery, they were not met by journalists in the assortment. But they were met by a smiling manager named Barry, who arrived at the appointed time. And having seated the dear guest in his office, Barry began to explain to them all the nuances of receiving the winnings. Do they want to take it all at once, paying more tax, or to receive the winnings in installments over many years, paying less tax? The spouses responded in agreement that they want to take it all at once. "Do we need the help of a financial advisor?" "What do you think we are, children?" Naomi replied importantly. "We'll figure it out on our own." Alex made a note in his mind to hire a financial advisor at least to manage his share of the winnings. Barry asked if they wanted to remain anonymous or if they wanted an in-depth interview. Either way, one should be photographed with a huge, so to speak, revealing lottery ticket. But if you want, you can hide your face in the picture, for example by wearing a mask. "Let's get the mask," Alex blurted out. "Okay," smiled Barry. "We have a few keepsakes for those who win." "Do they often win a lot?" Naomi asked. "No, certainly not like you." Barry waved his hands. "But just imagine, there are many superstitious people, even those who want to keep 10,000 a secret. Now, first of all, here are the papers. I need your signatures on all 3 copies, and then let's take a picture of you." They also discussed the terms of transferring the money, to which account to do it. Naomi insisted that half of it should be given in cash. Alex chose the bank account. Then we went to take the picture. Alex felt a bit silly in a plastic zebra mask, but he was comforted by the fact that his wife looked silly in a monkey mask. They were handed a giant cardboard ticket on which they had written 10 million in numbers with a marker. The host stood up and beside them and smiled broadly. And then, well, everything happened quickly. Alex didn't even have time to be scared. He was only in shock, because suddenly the doors to the studio were literally taken out. They were kicked out by the special forces. Everyone fell on the floor, and then, in general, they and the staff of the same operator, for example, were not touched. But Barry went somewhere, and then they explained to the walkers that here's the deal. In general, the company organizer of the lottery, as it turned out, was involved in a big and dirty case of money laundering from the Colombian mafia. And in fact, the winnings could have been given away. The company planned to spend such a little of the really gigantic funds rotating on its accounts, but it was impossible because, as were sure those who crushed the company now, all the funds were obtained by criminal means. Which meant, well, they had to be confiscated. That is, Alex understood little from what was said, from the bizarre and sounding as if in an alien language explanations. "We didn't win." "Yes and no at the same time," sighed the lawyer. His name was James, and he explained, was supposed to represent all the people affected by this company in the upcoming big case. Yes, some of the lotteries were conducted in violation of some rules, so people could get compensation for the sums of money spent on unwinnable lottery tickets. Those who had already received their winnings and spent them, by the way, they were told that nothing would happen, that is, they were not going to be forced to return the money. Alex and Naomi were told that they could get back the money spent on the ticket. And in case of a favorable development of events, they can even apply to get compensation for moral damage. "What the hell is going on there?" Alex exclaimed heartily. "The only time in my life I dared to buy a ticket, hit the jackpot, and then it turns out to be not real. I can't believe it," Naomi said in a trembling voice. "Is there really nothing that can be done?" "I'm afraid not," James replied sympathetically. "I sincerely sympathize with you. You must have counted on that money a lot." "Yes," Alex muttered. He suddenly thought that Pedro would hardly be satisfied with the answer that things had turned out this way, so he would have to pay back the debt. And now it was very, very scary to think about how much his wife had managed to spend. Finally, when all the formalities were over, the Walker couple had the opportunity to return home. They took the latest flight on the bus just to get back as soon as possible. They went physically and mentally exhausted, hungry, irritated, and disappointed in life to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. In general, they had originally planned to spend the night in the city, staying in a hotel. But the plans, as fate mockingly decreed, changed so quickly that they returned on the very last flight and arrived at the house in the night. Alex unlocked the door and entered. "Quiet. Don't wake up your son. Let him sleep. Fussing all day long, young people," Alex said with fatherly concern. "Alex," he heard his wife's voice when he had already reached the dark corridor to the bedroom. "And Max is not home. What do you mean?" Alex was confused. "He ran away to someone else for a sleepover again, the bastard." A lamp lit up under the ceiling. Alex squeezed his eyes shut, blinked at the light, and then saw a folded notebook in his wife's hands. His heart pricked with a bad feeling. He's writing. He's better." Naomi held out the note as if it was not a message from her son, but, for example, a drawing of an adder that could come to life and sting under the influence of some malicious magic. Alex thought it would be a good idea to put on his glasses. Then he remembered that he had taken them on a trip and forgot them because at some point on the way home, he urgently went to his bag for medicine. His heart whimpered, and Alex, until it let go, frantically recounted in his mind all the symptoms of an impending heart attack. But now it seemed he was not in danger of a heart attack. He just felt so dreary. It seemed that the whole life suddenly went wrong. Dreams of a happy and rich life collapsed. The only son left home again, and it seems that in the future it will be even more difficult to communicate with him. In general, judging by the content of the letter, Max was not so far from home in the geographical scale, but the feeling was as if the absent-minded son ran away to the end of the world. And in general, the content of the letter was extremely strange. In it, Max apologized to his parents for the fact that he was bad at school and disgusting behavior in personal communication with them, and expressed hopes, by the way supported by many exclamation marks, that one day everything would change. Everything would change so that they would be able to leave their former life and start again as one big and friendly family. He wrote that he had found someone to live with in town and that he had to think about everything. "I was an old fool," Alex exclaimed. "I should have just taken him with me." "Alex, what exactly does he write?" Naomi asked in a trembling voice, and when her husband handed her the note to read, Naomi clutched her heart. "Strange. What's weird? That the son is a jerk?" Alex sighed. "No. This one, see. He wrote a poem at the end. Well, at least he's creative. Maybe he'll become a poet." "Alex," Naomi shook her head. "Oh, come on. Come on. Put some tea on, and I'll call around. Maybe he's in the hands of someone we know. Martin, his friend. Maybe he's with him. Or Ellis. Why are you looking at me like that? She's a normal girl. Do whatever you want." Alex waved his hand. He just wanted to stay by himself and think about everything. After a quick tea and a snack, the couple went to bed. The next morning, Naomi said that she would go to the stores to hand over most of the things she had bought, because, fortunately, she hadn't cut the tags off them yet, and therefore they should be accepted and refunded. "It's a pity, of course," sighed the wife, taking out of the closet dress color zebra and putting it in a bag. "Well, come on. Still not to age to wear such a thing. And where do I dress up? I'm not old enough. So..." Alex realized with surprise that he felt sorry for his wife, in the sense that she was upset that she can't dress nicely, and he made a mental note in his mind to spend better, to find an additional part-time job, but to please his wife in the near future, to give her money to buy herself some new clothes. And time passed, and the son did not return. He didn't call. A strong cold wind blew from the mountains in the evening, and low clouds seemed ready to pour rain or maybe even sprinkle the first snow. "All right, that's enough," Naomi said, taking her jacket off the rack. "I'm going to the sheriff's office. My son is missing. He hasn't even called. No, something's definitely happened to him, and no one I know has seen him." "I'm coming too," said Alex, who suddenly realized with frightening clarity that Max had never really left home for so long. Yes, he wrote that he would live somewhere, but where? It was impossible to bear this uncertainty any longer, and on the heart became immensely, boundlessly anxious. And what if they missed the time, and while he was waiting, the parents themselves are so absent-minded, angry at his son? Something bad has already happened to him. We reached the police station quickly, and here, however, we had to wait because some man with a group of support in the person of two women, must be his wife and mother-in-law, as well as a loudly yapping small dog, sitting in the purse of the latter, was indignant about the wrongly allegedly issued fines and the fact that his car was driven away to a special parking lot. "Can we talk to someone quickly?" Alex waved his hands, attracting the attention of one of the officers who was standing by the coffee machine. "Yes, sir. What can I do for you?" A tall, dark-skinned guy answered. "Officer Jerry Smith. What's your emergency?" "Our son is missing," Naomi exclaimed. We had a fight and..." "It's my fault." The woman, unable to hold back her feelings, cried. "It's all my fault. I didn't notice how bad he was feeling. And now my Max has decided he'd rather leave home." "Ma'am, it's gonna be okay. Sit down and here, maybe some water." Officer Jerry spoke to her in a friendly manner. Now tell me in order, how old is your son? When did he go missing? Any idea where he might have gone? Interrupting each other at times, the couple recounted everything that had happened recently between them and Max. Actually, since he's an adult, we can't find him and bring him home. You understand that, don't you? I know everything, Alex said, but is there nothing that can be done? Understand, he used to take offense, then he came back. We called all the friends and acquaintances at whom he could stay. He is nowhere to be found. And this bad company, we're afraid something might happen to him. And here's another, a note. Sniffling, Naomi held out a crumpled piece of paper. Jerry read it, then read it again, frowned. Veronica? He called out, and a minute later a female officer came up to them. Take a look at this. What are you talking about? Alex asked. The female officer walked over to them. Jerry briefly told her what had happened, and added, looking sternly at the parents of the missing young man, that theoretically they could find him, but next they could only make sure that he was okay. They can tell him that they found him at his parents' request, but no more. You see, your son included a poem in the note, and Jerry hesitated. Could it be some kind of hidden message too? You said it was a strange thing for him to do. Hey, I know that poem, Veronica exclaimed. It's from my childhood, when I was about 14. What do you mean? Alex asked. Hear him. Stretched Veronica. Exactly. Listen. Where the heart stops. Where the sun kisses the puma. Where I'll find peace. Where I'll dance under the moon. When she finished reading, Veronica looked at Alex and Naomi. In the early 19th century, there was a poet. He published poems signed as anonymous, and in them he praised the local beauty of nature. For some reason, your son cited a passage from a poem about our mountains, and as far as I know, he's pointing to Puma Rock. That's not good. Jerry shook his head. You mean he could be there? Naomi grasped at a glimmer of hope. We can't know that for sure, ma'am. Jerry began cautiously. We'll find out for sure, and we'll send out a search party. But what? Just say it. Alex was sick of the unknown and was ready to grab the officer by the collar of his uniform shirt and shake him so that he would stop stalling and tell the truth. Unfortunately, it looks like your son is out of town. We are talking about an inaccessible and dangerous place here. The Puma Cliff is not allowed to be climbed at all this time of year. There's often icing present, and even professional hikers risked serious injury. And your son, ma'am, sir, he's not a professional, is he? No. Naomi shook her head. My Max is a quiet, ordinary homeboy. He just can't survive in the mountains. Please save him. Jerry, hey Jerry. Another cop flew up to the little group. Well, one of Pedro's men is badly hurt, and I think you ought to see this. Did that idiot decide to use a gun after all? Jerry raised an eyebrow. No, I think something more serious happened. Aren't you going to look for my son? Naomi grabbed the arm of the officer who was about to leave. Ma'am, Veronica will help you fill out the appropriate paperwork and make sure the search begins as soon as possible. But I have to step away right now. I've been hoping for a long time that I'd have a chance to capture this Pedro freak. And if there's an excuse, I won't miss it for anything. Max could only think of one thing. Everything he had done in the last 24 hours or so had been a mistake. He had never been so wrong in his life. But the worst thing was that he also knew that most likely he would not be able to fix anything. Lying on his back, the guy looked up at the sky. From the smoky clouds, the first snowflakes were falling. Max had lived in these parts all his life, and as any old-timer understood for sure that soon these rare snowflakes would turn into a full-fledged snowfall, and the air temperature would still drop. And then, well, if to be realistic, he would probably be dead by morning. After all, hypothermia coupled with great blood loss is no joke. Max coughed and his chest ached. It seemed that his heart was beating so hard that it would break his ribs. I wonder how many of my ribs are broken, thought Max. And also, although it was completely inappropriate, but the guy smiled. What an idiot. He went for the goal, they call it. And how does it end for him and Stewart? Max, sighing cautiously, turned his head. He could see Stewart. There he was lying down in the fallen leaves, and it seemed that he wasn't breathing at all. And just a couple of meters away from them, they could see the entrance to the cave. And there the fire they had built was burning out, giving the darkness and cold the rest of the heat and light. Max thought about how great in life is the importance of coincidences and how one event can, like a fallen dominoes, lead to many other events. And how well it had all started. Stewart gave the impression of a seasoned traveler. He brought everything they needed, from sleeping bags and food supplies to first aid kits and flares. They had old and new maps, a compass. In general, everything they needed. They moved out into the mountains secretly without attracting anyone's attention, and it was certainly the right decision. They climbed and climbed, sometimes making breaks. About halfway up, Max turned around and marveled at how tiny the city below seemed. It looked like a toy. He could have sworn that this was one of the most breathtaking sights of his life. Finally, they came to their destination on the Puma Cliff. It was here, according to Jeffrey and Stewart's research, that the gold was supposed to be hidden. Max felt cooler than he had on New Year's morning when he expected to find presents from his parents under the tree. He was ready to start searching right away. Why wait? Why wait? With many millions of dollars at his fingertips. But Stewart said they needed to rest. There was a lot of work to be done and they needed to be in shape because they might have to go a little deeper into the cave. Max fidgeted as if on pins and needles while his friend built a fire, cooked them food. They had a snack, chatted on topics that had nothing to do with what had brought them here. And then, finally, they started the real treasure hunt. Max was breathless with excitement and couldn't get rid of the thought that they wouldn't find anything here. But then, it turned out that from the cave there was a narrow passage. It was hidden by stones, and behind it there was another cave. And there, in general, they found gold. The rays of the lantern picked out the treasure and Max screamed with delight. Stewart put his palm over his mouth and told him to shut up, that it was bad luck, and that his screams might attract a predator. They left the caves. They covered the entrance to the far one. Stewart said that they could take some of the gold down at once, but they would have to come back for the rest. Max agreed. They tossed some twigs into the fire and thought they would rest a bit and get to work. But suddenly people jumped out of the bushes. Max didn't understand at first who it was and even took them for tourists, or for those who found out that they were looking for gold and followed them. But they weren't tourists or treasure hunters. They were some of the most suspicious-looking types, and one of them, to Max's disgust, was familiar. Pedro was the man the whole town hated, but the cops, unfortunately, didn't have enough evidence to get him yet. One look at Stewart was enough for Max to realize he was assessing the situation, and it looked like they had a pretty good chance 3 against 2. That's good. And then Pedro told him why they were here and Max's jaw dropped. It turned out that Max's mother had borrowed money from the bandit, and she'd blabbed to him about the lottery winning, so he'd been following Max because he decided to kidnap him and demand a ransom. You were never alone, Pedro grinned. Well, I'll have to take you and your friend. We'll get something for him too. I'm afraid you won't find anyone willing to pay for me, grinned Stewart grimly. Then we'll have to get rid of you, Pedro shrugged. And in the next instant there would have been a fight, but like lightning the puma came out of the bushes. Max even had time to marvel at the graceful power of its flight. The animal jumped a great distance and came down to the ground, striking one of Pedro's henchmen on the leg with its paw. The man howled in pain. Then a shot rang out. The puma bounced back with a roar. And Pedro and 2 of his men rushed down the mountain. The puma, the huge cat, froze, wiggling its ears and obviously deciding what to do to run after its prey, which had proved that it could resist or to stay here, where there was another prey, perhaps more defenseless, and the cougar chose the latter. Slowly, so that there was a chance to admire the muscles rolling under the silky fur, it stepped towards Max and Stewart. Freeze, Stewart said. Don't turn your back on her. I'm going to try to reach the cave now. A fire. She must be scared of the fire. It's our only chance. No, Max's teeth were chattering with fear. You mustn't do this. I've got no one anyway. Are you an idiot? My parents don't care about me. They can't solve their own problems, Max said with a desperate defiance of fate. And you, study, scientific career. You have more reasons to survive than me. And without giving his friend any more time to argue, Max rushed towards the cave. And of course he lost. In the next few moments, several things happened. Secondly, Max thought that he should not really show his back, but should have kept eye contact with the beast. For the umpteenth time in his life, his impulsiveness had failed him. Secondly, Max felt a powerful blow of a heavy body and was thrown to the ground. He barely managed to roll over on his back. He had heard somewhere that wild cats try to get to the throat first, but this particular puma suddenly bit somewhere in the ribs, and wild pain mixed with the same surprise. Max tried to struggle. Then he saw a burning stick flickering behind the puma. Stewart had brought it from the cave, and now he was just trying to fight his friend off. The puma roared and turned around to attack the other man. Max didn't see what happened, but he only realized that Stewart was lying motionless. He dropped the stick and the fire went out. "Hey you!" Max shouted with all his might. "I'm over here." The cougar turned around. "I must be hallucinating," Max thought. "If it seems that the beast is looking meaningfully and as if taunting. You came here in vain. In vain you coveted the gold that is cursed. Now you will join those who left their bones here forever, chasing after gold, and so you should." "You're wrong," muttered Max, seeing the cougar slowly creeping toward him with no other intention than to finish what he'd started. "You stupid cat," whispered the guy, and then lost consciousness, and on the verge of falling into darkness. He wished only one thing, that the faint was deep enough to not feel much pain when the cougar would take that very last bite, after which everything would be over for him. Max was very surprised that he was still alive. Yes, he was definitely alive. True, he couldn't move. It was too painful, and he was too tired. And besides, it seemed that with every moment his body was being poured with such a heaviness, which at the same time brought a strange relief. The guy blinked often. Snowflakes fell on his face. High up in the dark sky, the moon was shining, but also from behind the mountain range, the sun was slowly rising. They lay here all night. He knew the cougar had gone. Why? Who would understand a wild animal? Maybe it just doesn't feed on humans. Or did it decide that it had done enough and they were finished anyway? Max thought about the fact that it was actually ending in a very stupid way. They had found gold after all. It could have changed their lives so much. Also, it was worth recognizing. It would be such a solid historical discovery. So now what? They'll be celebrated as the last victims of the cursed gold. After all, it will surely be discovered the passage to the second cave they disguised so poorly. And then Max realized that he really wanted to sleep. It seemed that it was enough just to dive into the saving sleep, and there would be no more cold and pain. There would be just peace, and before giving himself up to it, it seemed to him that he was seeing hallucinations again, because he felt the barking of dogs and that people came out from behind the trees. He felt that a man was leaning over him, shining a flashlight in his eyes and ordering him not to sleep, to stay with them. Max found a little more strength to smile and still fell asleep. Alex and Naomi sat at their son's bedside, the third day almost without sleep. The doctor said that it was a miracle that both guys were incredibly lucky that the cougar didn't hit anything vital. But of course, it had shaken them badly and many scars could not be removed. The doctors also said that if the guys had been found a couple of hours later, there would have been almost no chance to save them. Max was kept on powerful painkillers. He was incredibly bad both from injuries and from the side effects of powerful drugs. But finally, after a day, the doctors announced that he was on the mend. Naomi and Alex practically never left the hospital. They just refused to do so, even though the doctors said that they had better get some rest themselves. "Mom, Dad?" The couple shuddered, hearing the weak voice of their son. They dozed off a little. "Son," Naomi cried again, now with joy, and rushed to his bed. "My boy." "Hello, son," said Alex, and in an impulse, he wanted to take the boy's hand, but he wrinkled it. Any movement or touch caused a searing pain. "I'm sorry," Alex said hastily. "How are you?" "Alive, it seems." Max smiled weakly, but then his face contorted with anxiety. "Stewart." "He's alive too. He's fine. They're treating him," Alex said hurriedly. "You asked about him all the time while you were raving about him. I thought you were going to call your parents, not him." He's my best and only real friend," Max said. "I thought you didn't need me at all." "You're such an idiot," Naomi said. "We love you very much, son." They talked some more about the treatment that would be necessary in the future, about what the doctor saw in the future. How did you win? Did you get it? Max asked with a smile. Well, actually, Naomi looked at her husband. Alex nodded, and she decided to tell how everything happened and how they not only lost the money, but now they also owed. I'm sorry, this is probably a bad time. I was distracted from the conversation by a familiar man. It was Officer Jerry, standing in the doorway of the room. But I'm on a break right now, and I thought I should stop by and... Hey, kid. He smiled at Max. You're a hero. Why would I be? Max was surprised. Not everyone can stand up to a cougar. Stewart is the one to praise. If it hadn't been for him, it would have eaten me for sure. I've already talked to him, Jerry nodded. Do you have a minute? I won't bore you too much, will I? Come in, Max said, and Jerry came in, pulling up a chair. He spoke and said that he had overheard the end of the conversation with his parents. And I must say that the repayment of Pedro's debt could certainly wait now, because that scoundrel has been arrested. His man, the one who was bitten first by the puma, has fallen into such a state that while the doctors were treating his wounds, he sold out his boss, as they say, with all his guts. And thanks to the fact that he pointed out where and how Pedro was making his illegal deals, where he kept his weapons and some illegal stuff. Thanks to all this, it was possible to arrest him. We'd also talked to Stewart about the gold, kid, Jerry said. Don't worry, it's down, it's safe. What gold? I don't understand. What are you talking about? Asked Naomi. Wow, grinned Jerry. So your parents don't know what you and your buddy were up to and what you found? No, I haven't had a chance to tell them yet. Max answered and didn't hesitate to tell his parents about how Stewart had shared his plans to find the cursed treasure. Oh, it doesn't matter. You're alive. We don't need that gold. It's the reason for what happened to you. Naomi felt tearful again. No, Mom. I personally need the gold, Max replied seriously. Stewart explained that we are owed a lot of what we found. You're a business-minded guy, Jerry nodded. I am. I think you're going to be several tens of millions richer in the next few months. But since you don't have insurance, you need the money right now. Anyway, the mayor has decided to give you some help, so to speak. So get well and don't worry about a thing. All right, get some rest. Jerry was about to leave the room, but turned around with a sly grin. By the way, journalists are already on duty at the door of the clinic. They can't wait to interview the guys who not only neutralized the bandits, but also fought a cougar. But it wasn't like that, Max exclaimed. There's no stopping the media's fantasies, kid, chuckled Jerry. You and Stewart will have to get used to living like celebrities now. Well, have a good day. By the way, when you get better, the detectives will come to see you. They need your testimony in Pedro's case. Alex couldn't believe what he was hearing. But for some reason, he felt neither delighted that his son was rich, nor any special hopes that now their family's life would change a lot. He was just glad that his child was alive and healthy. Well, he would be healthy soon. And Alex was sure that Naomi felt the same way. Since the day Max had found the gold and the cougar had found it, it had been a little over a year. Somewhere far away, the mountains were covering the first snow, and it also covered the street where the trailer houses were located. But Naomi and Alex couldn't see it, because they were miles away in Florida. They had moved here only recently, but they already felt like home. Here their son had bought for them a small but very cozy house. Near it was a neat lawn and a flower garden. Max, when he received the reward, turned out to be a son, able to forgive all past offenses and ready to generously share with his loved ones what he received. And he also turned out to be a very smart guy. Alex was just shocked at how clever he was. However, Max himself waved away and said that Stewart consulted him on all matters. Max opened a trust fund in the name of his parents, and in addition to the house, gave them a car. Now Alex and Naomi had enough money in their account not to work at all, but they were thinking about finding something to do to keep themselves busy. And on the advice of their son, they started seeing a marriage counselor. And no, the love they had at the beginning of their marriage did not return instantly, but at least the relationship was no longer teetering on the brink of divorce. I miss you, Naomi said. She and Alex were sitting on the veranda drinking evening tea and apple pie. It's normal, I guess, said Alex. He's all grown up now. He should make his own life. He didn't want to admit in such a silly sentimentality that he missed him too. because Max decided to become a historian and enrolled in a university in a distant state. He said he found his calling back there in the mountains and planned to spend his life studying the history of America's first settlers. And though Alex and Naomi did not quite agree with his choice, but what could they do? They could only accept their son's choice, wish him luck, and be grateful to fate that everything turned out so well in the end. Honey, well, how about Friday night? The gorgeous blonde with lush forms pouted capriciously, but Evan did not fall for this trick and continued to do what he had been doing all day, analyzing all the documentation of his restaurant. Evan was proud of his brainchild. Velvet did not leave the top positions in the ratings of the best places in the city, including those made by international magazines and critics. "I told you, I'm busy. Entertain yourself," he said, wasting the last drops of patience on his friend. Damn it, how can things go wrong when everything is perfect on paper? It would be easy to believe that someone was putting a spell on him, but in principle, it was clear that things weren't going badly. But Evan realized that he was setting the bar too high, because there's no such thing as perfection. "Go to the beauty parlor or go shopping," he said. "Did you run out of money on your card, babe?" He looked up and reached out and slapped her thigh, which was covered in scarlet silk. Today she was wearing the dress he especially liked to see on her, but he still couldn't afford such a weakness. "If you be so kind as to move over, you're sitting on the dessert recipes," he asked, and the blonde, pouting her lips again, obeyed. They'd been dating for over 2 years now, and so far he wasn't bored with Christy. 24 years old, an aspiring model, dreaming of becoming a famous singer, but the courses he had paid for, as well as the recording of the track and even its small promotion on the local radio, had not yet brought any success. Not brought, because Christy did not want to realize the singing talent she did not have. But she had plenty of other qualities, and if she were a little less harmful, this girl would be worthless. Sighing, Evan rubbed his forehead. He hadn't slept for 2 days and was trying to figure out how to keep Velvet from falling. No, at first glance, there seemed to be nothing to worry about, but his gut had never failed him before, and this time it was screaming alarm. It was urgent to save the situation. Sometimes, though, Evan thought he was getting paranoid, because Velvet was his greatest achievement. And in fact, it was all he had: his life, its meaning, his future. And he'll be damned if he's going to let anyone mess that up. Sighing again, Evan raked up all the papers until the time when he would be ready to dive into them again. In the meantime, he was waiting for the things that had to be done every day in a luxury restaurant, like training the new waitress who had potential but was not mature enough to serve special tables and was kept for the regular customers. "That's it, Bunny." Evan forced a smile out of himself and nodded at Christina to the door. "I have work to do." The blonde snorted, got off the desk, adjusted her dress, not forgetting to twist her hips seductively, and walked out of the office with her patron. A light kiss before parting, and she strode down the hall to the door. Evan saw her get into her car, a caramel pink sports car, which, by the way, he had to pay fines for because Christy drove so badly. Shoving his hands in his jacket pockets, Evan glanced around the main room of the Velvet. To think of the state this place had been in when he first come here and what it had become. Just a jewel among all other restaurants of Mr. Walker, and he wanted to believe, and Evan believed, would soon be honored with a generous offer of full partnership from Walker. He had realized long ago that he would not be satisfied with being just a restaurant manager. In this life, he intended to fly as high as possible. And most importantly, he's not going to let himself fall. Not after what he'd been through. And then suddenly Evan's eyes snapped to the ground, because at the far table by the window stood that new girl, Lucy. The girl smiled and chirped. Her voice was beautiful, but she spoke too hurriedly and her diction needed work. Because at Velvet, even the waiters weren't regular people, they had to conform. Evan rounded his eyes because at first his brain refused to digest what he was seeing. Because at the table by the window, there was a bum. Some old woman in a brown overcoat, with a low kerchief tied on her head, with holey shoes on her feet, warm pantyhose, and a ridiculous dress that was obviously too big for her. Evan noticed all the details with a sickening realization as he walked to the table. Soon as he got closer, a sour, heavy odor hit his nose. What a stench! And what luck that there was nobody at the neighboring tables yet. And the only visitors in this part of the hall, which, by the way, is divided into sections by open-work partitions, is a couple in love. They are busy with each other celebrating their anniversary and see nothing, hear nothing from their love. "Lucy, what is it?" Evan asked hoarsely, unable to hold back his irritation. The waitress straightened up and smiled stupidly. "Here, Grandma came. She was cold and thought we had a dining room. But we're not a canteen and we're definitely not a homeless shelter." Evan nodded at what clearly didn't fit into Velvet's upscale concept. Was she even in her right mind? The grandmother looked to be well into her 80s, her face elongated, wrinkled like a baked apple, with a sharp nose and pouty lips. She was sitting with her hands on the table, rubbing a photograph in her fingers and muttering something to herself. "I'm sorry," Lucy seemed to realize she'd done something wrong. "It's a hurricane outside. She's freezing. She came in and came straight here. On the edge of the village, she's quiet." "I understand. Other people usually come to us." The girl smiled shyly and threw a look of sympathy at the elderly visitor. Evan cringed at the pitying look. "But can I bring her some soup? We have a soup of the day. It is inexpensive. Soup." Evan grinned unkindly and stepped close to Lucy, hovered over her, which at the difference in height of 1.90 m and 1.60 m, made an impression on the guilty fool. She squeaked softly and pressed the menu to her chest. "What village did you come from, my dear? Do you think this homeless woman has money to pay for the salt the cook puts in the soup? Do you realize what you've done? Do you realize what it looks like? But I'm sorry, but I can pay for the soup myself, and for the tea, and a scone for her." Lucy mumbled, seemingly not noticing how dangerously heavy her boss's breath was getting, how hard his eyes were darkening. "She's cold, and I think she's lost. I thought she could use a little refreshment, and then I'd ask her where she lives, who her family is, and—" Evan raised his palm, then turned to the old woman. "Can you hear me? I'm sorry, but you're going to have to leave. Unfortunately, our facility is not up to your capabilities. Can you hear me?" Granny seemed to be warmed up by the heat. She kept muttering to herself and didn't even look at him, but she reached for a graceful figure of a porcelain leopard in the shade of malachite. Such figurines were on every table in the restaurant, a small touch of corporate style. A famous designer invited from France was working on it. The old woman grasped the figurine with her fingers, hummed something, then breathed on it and started rubbing it with the sleeve of her coat. Evan grimaced, and everything she touched would have to be disinfected, and the velvet sofa might as well be thrown away. "She's crazy," he said, and went to the other end of the room. Mickey's guard was standing there. A solid-looking guy, not your average bouncer, but a top-class guard. But he was, in Evan's opinion, a simpleton. Instead of doing his job, he was in the kitchen, chatting with Ariana, the dishwasher, of course. Except it was impossible to fire Mickey, because he was Mr. Walker's distant nephew. And Mickey came to work in security because he failed his university exams. But the hope was that this year Walker would bribe someone and Mickey would quit. Then Evan was going to take the wrong kind of asshole. In the meantime, he outlined to Mickey what was required of him. He was surprised, apologized, and went off to solve the problem. "What are you doing?" exclaimed Lucy when Mickey delicately, but still sternly, helped her up by pulling her off the sofa by the armpits and then, holding her by the shoulders, led her to the exit. "How could you do that?" Lucy followed, with Evan trailing behind. The girl was finished, he decided. This would be her third and final reprimand. She could only get a job serving soup to the homeless, as she said, and no more. "Granddaughter, daughter," the old woman suddenly mumbled when all four of them had already gone outside. Mickey let go of her and she started tearing back. She was trying to push Mickey's closet out of the way. "We need to call the nut house." Evan gritted his teeth, horrified to feel the migraine coming back, which had seemingly been extinguished by a horse's share of painkillers. "I got it," Lucy said. She left the photo card on the table. "I'll be right back. I'll get it." The waitress rushed inside. Evan, with his hands on his chest, waited impatiently. Finally, Lucy returned. "Okay," he took the picture from her. "That's it. Get inside. Go to the staff room and wait for me there. We're gonna have a serious talk." "But what did I do? Do you even have a heart?" The normally timid Lucy, the one who was shaken at the drop of a hat, has suddenly gone ballistic. An old, helpless person. She just wanted to get warm and eat. I know Velvet is a place for the rich, but don't you have a shred of mercy in you? Evan handed the picture to Grandma. Here you go. And get out of here. No, he turned to the waitress. You know, Velvet wouldn't even exist if people like you were in charge. So if you don't like Velveeta and its concept, then why did you come to work here? Okay, Lucy, I was gonna give you one last chance, but you're fired. Are you going to take your picture or not? Evan shouted at the old woman, who for some reason dropped her hands and looked away down the street. The rain was running down her face, she just froze. Evan sighed. It was lucky that there were no other people around. For example, the ubiquitous bloggers. Recently, some of them came and ordered the cheapest thing, filmed everything, commented. I had to take them to my office and seriously talk about the fact that such antics are forbidden in Velvet, and no reviews on the institution, except from professionals, should not appear on the network. Evan was about to slip the photo into the pocket of the old woman's coat, but then he looked at it and froze, because there was a familiar face staring back at him. The face of the person whom he had thought all these years to be lost to him forever, but it was her, exactly her. Only older by a few years since their last meeting, since that terrible day. The photograph showed a young girl of about 16 in a sky blue polka dot dress. On her head were 2 long braids with blue bows. On her lips is a wide, warming smile. How beautiful she is. The girl is sitting on a swing, an ordinary car tire, suspended on a tree branch. The picture was taken in the light flight of the swing. She stretched forward barefoot with graceful small feet, wrapped her arms around the ropes and lasts, looking directly at the shooter. Evan Mickey's voice brought him out of his contemplation. Are you all right? Eh? What? Evan blinked in confusion. Where did you get that? He exclaimed, bringing the photograph closer to the old woman. You know this girl, don't you? Granddaughter. Granddaughter. The old woman's eyes, which seemed almost sightless because of their very light ice blue hue, focused on the photograph. She grasped it with her hands, held it towards her, and Evan gave it to her. Catherine, where is Catherine? Baba wants to go to Catherine. Baba is cold. Baba wants to eat. Evan asked Mickey, what are we going to do? Evan said, Lucy, don't ruin it. What kind of day is this? Exclaimed the restaurant manager. Stop howling. I've had enough, he ordered Lucy. Take her, he said to Pavel, pointing at the old woman. In the back room. Idiot. Not through the front door. The staff entrance. Into the second room, where we usually meet to discuss things. And you, he turned to Lucy. Go to the kitchen, get some hot food and drink, and bring it all there, understand? Okay. The waitress nodded like a dummy. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you so much. You're such a good man. He just turned and walked back into the restaurant. There was nothing to thank him for. He was doing all this now not so much out of humanity, but he just needed to know what had happened to the girl in the picture and where she was now. The past was back. The past he had buried long ago. A childhood spent in an orphanage can't be called a happy one. If we add to it the stubbornness and unwillingness of the little man to follow the rules established for everyone, his desperation to show and prove to everyone that he is not just an abandoned, nobody needs child, but something more, the picture is quite gloomy. Evan ended up in an orphanage after he was taken away from his alcoholic mother. His father was, not surprisingly, generally as a man ghost that is unknown. It happened when he was 7 years old, and for the first time he only ate hurriedly and slept a lot, unable to believe that the cold, fear, beatings, and hunger were left behind. Evan took what he was given, but he couldn't stand being pitied. He was silent and sullen. For a long time he refused to communicate with teachers who tried to understand whether he was ready for the first grade or to study in the program for children with special developmental needs. But suddenly it turned out that Evan was a very capable boy. He could easily be an excellent student if he understood why he needed it. Grades alone didn't interest him. He didn't socialize much with other kids, and he despised them in general. He hated to hear about how orphanage graduates might have a bad life and stubbornly said that he didn't care who he was before, but in the future he would become a millionaire and be a strong man. Naturally, they laughed at this, and sometimes even beaten up for being arrogant, but Evan never gave up. But everything in his life changed when Ekaterina appeared in the orphanage. In general, their way here was similar. She also came from a poor family of alcoholics, only they were not deprived of their rights. They themselves died from drunkenness. Catherine was immediately liked by everyone. Despite her past, this girl was kind, funny, able to forgive everyone, and everyone tried to help. She easily gave her studies, needlework. In general, it was something fabulous. Naturally, she had a crowd of friends. But despite all her bright qualities, she was still lonely. Sometimes she could freeze in thoughtfulness and did not react, even as she was touched on the shoulder. She was not crazy, just sometimes felt a sharp, irresistible need to be alone with her thoughts. She showed up at the orphanage when Evan was 9 years old. She was a few years older. It was surprising to himself, but she was the only one Evan suddenly treated as an equal. They got along and socialized very well. "Can you influence him?" her teachers asked her more than once. "Evan is smart, but his character. He is a good person," always answered Catherine. "He just needs to understand himself." And then in the summer, when Catherine turned 14, a few guys decided to take on vacation some people. It was a couple with many children who devoted their lives to educating children from the orphanage. They lived in a large private house, and at first Evan even liked it there. In fact, he agreed to go too, just not to part with Catherine. But then something happened. The landlady suddenly announced Catherine that the girl had stolen her gold earrings, and Evan knew his friend was not capable of such a thing. The case took a bad turn. The husband of the mistress decided to punish Catherine by beating her with a belt. Evan was unable to stop him, but as soon as he could approach Catherine, he offered her to run away. And she, wiping her tears and complaining about how much her back hurts now, agreed. The night of the escape was a hurricane, but it did not stop the guys. Having got out of the gate, they decided that it was necessary to overcome only a small forest, and then moving along the river, they could get directly to the city and return to the orphanage. They did not dare to get on the transport. They were afraid that they would be caught and return to these terrible people. The weather forecasters later said that the rainfall for that night was a record. The usually calm little river turned into a raging, formidable stream. The young runaways had only to cross the bridge, and they would have reached the highway to the city. But the bridge collapsed. The children fell into the river. Evan woke up in the hospital. It turned out that he hit the rocks and broke his leg, hurt his back. He asked, "And how is Catherine?" He was ruthlessly told that because of his prank she almost died. Yes, they recognized that those people had done terrible things to Catherine, but they did not recognize that it was necessary to run in such weather and so far away. But the worst part was that Evan was told that due to the fact that he was a very bad influence on Catherine, the management of the orphanage had decided to transfer her to another institution. And in general, he was told that after this story, which was widely publicized, Ekaterina already found those who want to adopt such a nice and unhappy girl, so there's no way they'd ever see each other again. Evan would have run away from the hospital. He would have gone to the end of the world for Catherine, but he was sick. Then, when he was discharged, he returned to the orphanage. There, by the way, many guys already considered him a real hero. The guys patted him on the shoulder encouragingly and sympathetically, and the girls sighed. Evan felt that his world had turned upside down, shattered into atoms, and then reassembled in the wrong sequence, so that now it was something wrong. And then he found adopters again because of that story. And if earlier Evan said that he wouldn't go to any foster family, that he was fine on his own, now he agreed. It's like he's been replaced. His foster parents turned out to be good people. They were an English teacher and a history teacher at the university. They took care of Evan, didn't hurt him, and most importantly, didn't demand that he call them mom and dad. And then when he said at the age of 18 that he wanted to leave home and start living independently and on his own, they just shrugged their shoulders and said that of course he had every right to do so. Evan decided that he wanted to make a brilliant future for himself, so he went to university to study management. He entered, by the way, on a budget because he continued to study brilliantly. In parallel with his studies, he worked. And one day, when the search for a part-time job threw him in a chain pizzeria, he realized in the future he wants to work in a restaurant. Not as a chef, of course, but as its manager. Well, and then you can open your own restaurant, the best in the city. After graduating with a red diploma, Evan started looking for a job. Naturally, no one offered much to a newcomer with little experience, but Evan was not discouraged and stubbornly proved his usefulness. And after a few years it was appreciated, so began his career path, which eventually led him to the position of the director of Velvet. Moreover, before his arrival at this position, Velvet was considered to be not the best of Mr. Walker's establishments, and only Evan and a succession of his managers did the impossible in 3 years turn Velvet into a place that was considered to be one of the best in the city. And now that Evan was 29 years old, he felt that perhaps his dreams had finally begun to come true. He lived in a luxury apartment, he had a beautiful girlfriend, and in the near future loomed, perhaps, a partnership with the leading restaurateur Mr. Walker, who once hinted that he might open a restaurant in Monaco, and there would be very useful such a professional as Evan. The old lady was seated at the table. Lucy brought some food and sat down next to her. She was talking quietly to the grandmother, assuring her that everything was fine, that she was safe, that she could eat, rest, and then they would find her granddaughter and help her to return to her family. Evan stood with his arms folded across his chest and frowned. He had already proposed to call the doctors and let them help the woman to get her memory back. Maybe they would give her some medicine or a professional psychologist would work there. But Lucy, who seemed to be shaking like an aspen leaf, suddenly became brave and said that she had experience because her own grandmother, who was almost 90 years old, sometimes suffers from mental confusion, and any doctors will only create unnecessary stress. And so it may be possible to really now to get that grandmother said something that will give the necessary guidance. More than an hour passed. The old woman looked at the photo and sighed. Though she was small and gaunt, she had an excellent appetite. And now that she's warmed up, my daughter, Grandma said, and my name is Selena. Zena then smiled Lucy. Nice to meet you. And this is our master. She threw a warning glance at Evan not to say, now to press. Grandma, where do you live? My granddaughter's worried about you, I guess. I wanted them to help me. She chewed her lips, trying to remember something, but she couldn't. I asked for help, and they said I was crazy, and I'm not crazy. I know. It's buried there. Fetty and my dead man buried everything there. Buried what? Lucy was confused. John, who is he to you? My husband. Ekaterina is my granddaughter. She's my daughter. Evan rubbed the bridge of his nose and wrinkled his nose. One of your kids adopted her, right? We adopted her, Grandma said. Do you know this girl? Lucy asked. None of your business, Evan told her and walked over to the table, leaned on his hands, looking into his grandmother's eyes. Look, I'm really wildly apologizing for my behavior, but right now we need to focus on what's important. Where do you live? Far away. The pines are noisy. Granny covered her eyes, shook her head. The river is noisy. Good. John, my deceased, built the house with his own hands. Bears dancing. Yeah, we'll get far, Evan grinned. Wait, Lucy exclaimed. Did you say there were dancing bears? Wooden bears? Do you know what she means? Evan asked. I think I do. It's just that before I went into waitressing, I worked for a cleaning company and so I hired an ex-cleaner to be a waitress. Why didn't I mention that on my resume? I was afraid you wouldn't take it then. Lucy snickered. Okay, forget it. So what's the deal with the bears? Well, there was a call once to a cottage community. They have a sculpture of a couple of wooden animals at the entrance. A bear and a female bear dancing, holding hands, just like people. There used to be different scientist dachas of the elite, and now there's a cottage village. I know where it is. Great. Evan shone. So tell me the address and I'll take my grandmother there. You're by yourself? The girl was surprised. If her austere, groomed, self-centered, egotistical, arrogant, cynical, and self-important boss was capable of doing things beyond his image, this one was clearly beyond all boundaries. To drive his grandmother home himself, whom he had kicked out before. Lucy couldn't figure out what the point was, but it seemed to her that it had something to do with the girl in the picture. She seemed to be very important to Evan. Could it be, Lucy thought, that this man was capable of no love at all, or is it just a friend? But she said nothing. She helped her grandmother put on her outer clothes and supported her under her arm as they left the restaurant, incidentally through the staff door again. The drive was spent in silence. Evan focused on the road. It was the best thing he could do at the moment to focus on the road and not think about the fact that he had found her. Catherine. How many sleepless nights had he spent planning how to steal some documents from the orphanage director's office that would let him know where she was, who had adopted her? How many times had he dreamed that once he turned 18, he would become independent and travel all over the earth to find her? And then, what, in fact, was to happen then? Evan vaguely imagined. He only knew that he needed to know where Catherine was. What was wrong with her? He needed them to keep seeing each other, to keep in touch, and then he realized he loved her. He fell in love with her at first sight, but then it was still childish, very green feeling, woven of pure sympathy, platonic fascination with such an unearthly, amazing creature, and a desperate desire to have a soulmate, which Evan was afraid to admit to himself. Only when he grew up, he realized it was almost impossible to find Catherine. Impossible at all. In orphanages, of course, no one wanted to talk to him. You see, the mystery of adoption. He searched for graduates of his own orphanage and presumably the one to which Catherine had been transferred, but they knew nothing. And eventually hope faded. Evan realized that he just had to learn to live with it. He even began to convince himself that this was probably for the best. Really, what kind of couple were they? A good, clean girl and a tomboyish boy. They couldn't have any future together. And when hope faded, all that was left was faith. Pure faith that Catherine had turned out well. That she was loved in the foster family, not hurt. Just sometimes Evan prayed to the universe. Just let everything be good for her by default, as a gift from destiny. And as for him, he is able to take care of himself. That's all. Finally, the car reached the cottage village. There was a guard station at the entrance. Evan rolled down the car window and, pointing to the back seat where Selena was sitting, explained the situation. He found his grandmother in the city. He barely asked her where she was from. "Good afternoon, Selena," said the guard. "Yes, this is our resident, John's widow. Their house will be the last, if you go straight on the road and then turn, where the pine trees with 2 trunks stand. In general, do not miss. There's an intercom on the gate. Dial it and they'll open the door. They live in seclusion. Is she okay?" The guard asked quietly, when Evan was about to move on. "She's fine," he replied. "But she has someone to take care of her, right?" "She has a granddaughter," she said. "She will be like a granddaughter in age, but in fact Ekaterina is their daughter," the guard said, and added cautiously, glancing at the passenger. "They adopted her a long time ago. You're sorry, Selena, that I'm talking about you, but you aren't. Here, in what an adventure got stuck. I'm guiding the good man who helped you out." Evan thanked her and drove the car carefully down the road. A kind man. He grinned unhappily. Perhaps he was one of the last people on earth who could say that. But that was all right with him, because there was nothing he could do about it anyway. The right plot of land was easily found. The wooden 2-story house was clearly visible on the plot, fenced with wrought iron gates. Evan realized that since the death of the owner, everything had been solidly run instead of lawns, weedy tall grasses. Some vines braided the fence, and only near the house there was a tidy piece of land, and there were flowers blooming exuberantly, colorfully, as if a magician had splashed a bucket of colorful watercolors. Leaning out of the window, Evan rang the intercom. "Who is it?" a voice asked. Feminine, clear, beautiful. Evan, as numbed, he could have sworn with anything that it belonged to her, Catherine. Coughing nervously to clear his throat, he outlined briefly and confusedly, "Mommy." The doorbell on the other side of the intercom shrieked, and then the gate slid open. "Come through quickly." His fingers, like all his palms, were sweaty and trembling as he stepped out of the car. Evan tried to pull himself together, but it wasn't working. Up close, the house looked bizarre, a combination of modern cottage architecture and a fairy tale terrain. There were even carved shutters on the windows and a fancy horse on the roof. "Home. I'm home." Granny looked around and smiled. "I'm home." And then the door opened. Evan froze. Catherine stood before him. It had been so many years. He didn't have a single picture of her. But he would recognize her from a billion faces. And what was the magic that she hadn't changed much? The same high cheekbones, narrow nose, and plump lips, huge, slightly naively open eyes. Her blonde braid was thrown over her shoulder, with a blue ribbon woven into it. And the dress she was wearing, a blue dress. He realized it was uncannily similar to the one she'd been photographed in when she was young, but it was still new. He was about to open his mouth to tell her, but he realized suddenly she didn't recognize him at all. Not a shadow of recognition. She looks at him like a stranger who brought her grandmother, or rather her foster mother. Grateful, excited, grateful again, and a little suspicious because he's a stranger. Catherine, the old woman, literally fell into the arms of the girl, and they together almost collapsed on the floor. "Let me help," Evan said, taking Selena under his elbow. "Come in," the girl said and smiled shyly. His heart snapped at that smile, intended not for an old friend, but for a stranger, and also from the fact that Catherine wore boat shoes with white socks. How old-fashioned. That's how shoes were worn in the 30s, I think, but it suited her. The three of them went into the kitchen. Evan noted the details of the kitchen space in a casual, professional way, organized competently, but without frills. Gas stove. No dishwasher. Wooden countertops, but not cheap substitute material made of chips and glue, but solid, good wood. The faucet over the sink, as well as the handles of the fittings, all stylized under the brass antiques, and maybe it is. On the windows tow with lace and variegated curtains, which adds to the whole interior rustic color. "Mom, you're hot." Catherine helped the old woman take off her coat, then sat down, undressing her. "Thank you." In turn, turned to Evan. "You're our savior." I didn't know what to do and think. I called everywhere. I thought she had gone to the village by train, but it turned out she had gone to the city. "Have a seat." She smiled radiantly, and Evan almost choked from the feelings that overwhelmed him. "Oh, sorry, we haven't introduced ourselves yet. Catherine." She extended her hand to him and he took it. Slender fingers, dry palm. He could swear on anything that if he held it up to his face and smelled it, it would smell sweet and purely of strawberry soap, just as it had years ago. "Evan." "Evan." He introduced himself by his adoptive parents' last name. "Have a seat. I'll put the tea on. Or better, coffee." Catherine fussed, fluttered. "Whatever." He swallowed hard and sank down on a chair, as if descended from an illustration about the museum. From what he could see as he walked through the hallway to the kitchen, the whole house was furnished like this. Unusual, expensive, flamboyant, but tasteful. The coziness and comfort of modern life is not missing. Soon on the table appeared a kettle, cups and saucers, everything that is supposed. The young lady of the house put out a vase of chocolate-covered marshmallows, a vase of marmalade, a jar of honey, and although Evan was reluctant, she cut sandwiches. He could hardly eat a bite, but the grandmother began to eat everything with a wolfish appetite. Naturally, her daughter wanted to know how it was, and naturally, Evan couldn't tell the whole truth. He was almost ashamed, because it was Catherine in front of him, the embodiment of his conscience in the distant past. And now she was influencing him in a very strange, but extremely obvious way. No, it was not that he was uncomfortable for the way he kicked out a homeless-looking old woman from his restaurant. He was uncomfortable because Catherine would strictly condemn him for it. Evan presented a version of events after the censorship said that Selena came into the restaurant, that he immediately realized that she was lost and began to ask questions, and so brought. During the conversation, Evan cast worried glances at Selena. He felt that now the old woman would roll out her blind eyes, point her finger at him and shout, "You're lying, you liar. You drove me, old woman, out into the cold. You didn't want to give me soup." But Selena, it seemed, as Evan hoped, did not perceive reality as part of what it was and probably forgot how she had been thrown out, remembered only how she had been fed, questioned, and brought here. "You are our savior," once again said Catherine. "Well, I should probably go," Evan said and got up. He felt strange. He could barely keep himself from grabbing Catherine by the shoulders, shaking her properly, and into her eyes and screaming, "Don't you remember me?" "Remember me? My name is Evan. We grew up together in the orphanage, alone against the whole world. And then, when we fell into the river, we were separated. You remember?" And he also wanted from the pinching pain in his heart to embrace Catherine, hold her tightly against him, and say that finally he found her and never again and nowhere from himself will not let go. And since such moods made him dizzy and his eyes dark, Evan decided that it was better to leave. "Thank you." Catherine smiled sincerely. "Oh, what are we, so we can get lost? Let's exchange phone numbers if you don't mind." "I don't mind," Evan replied. He would not be happier if now he was given $1 million. He took out his smartphone, Catherine her phone, a simple button phone by the way, and they exchanged numbers. "And maybe you'll stay for dinner?" Catherine asked. "Thank you, but no, I really have to go. Business is waiting." Evan resisted the temptation to stay. But before he left the house, the door opened and a guy appeared on the doorstep. About 25 years old, blonde, strong, and tall. A typical boxer or a visitor of martial arts clubs. He frowned when he saw Evan. "Who are you?" "Andrewsha. Looked out of the kitchen, Granny. I was lost and they found me." "It's okay, Harry." Ekaterina stepped forward and Evan did not hide the instant change that affected the girl. Her shoulders tensed and rose. Her fingers took to nervously rubbing the tip of her braid. She averted her gaze and pressed her lips together. She explained how everything had happened. "I see," stretched out the mysterious Harry, whom Evan chronically disliked at first sight, and it seemed the feeling was mutual. Evan even hurriedly glanced at Catherine's hand and Harry's hand. No, there were no wedding rings. So who was he? An obliging neighbor? Her boyfriend? Or maybe brother would be the best way to put it. "Okay, thanks for helping," Harry said. Evan nodded and went out onto the porch. Catherine went outside but didn't come down from the porch. "Good luck to you. I hope your mom didn't catch a cold. The weather was." Awkwardly, Evan tried to say goodbye. "I'm sorry if I'm minding my own business, but you keep an eye on her. How far she's gotten." "Yes, I will." Catherine sighed and smiled sadly. "You're right, you have to keep an eye on your mom. But now, luckily, Harry is back and everything will be fine." "Aha," Evan nodded. "And if it's no secret, Harry, is he a relative of yours?" "He's a social worker," Catherine replied. "He helps my mom, and he helps me," she added thoughtfully. Evan noticed that the girl's gaze wandered strangely. She was looking down through the steps into the courtyard of the house. Then she looked up and looked inside the house. And then suddenly a hairpin slipped from the end of her braid and fell to the ground. Catherine froze. Evan watched her. The natural gesture would have been to pick up the dropped hairpin. All she had to do was climb down from the porch. But for some reason, Catherine didn't. Evan walked back to the house and picked up the hairpin and held it out to her. Their fingers touched for a moment. "Thank you," Catherine sighed. "You're welcome," Evan replied, and then got into the car and finally drove away, or rather he forced himself to leave. He had too much to think about now. Catherine was excitedly relaying to Harry everything that had happened to her mom. The boy was listening intently. His face was impenetrable now, but inside, a storm was raging. Damn it. Things had not gone according to plan at all. He'd been one step away from failure because he'd been too emotional, too hasty. He'd given the old woman the idea to take a walk away from the house. He'd hoped that such an occasion would help convince Catherine that her mother was out of her mind. But now Harry realized that he'd rushed into this whole thing. And he had rushed it because he was tired of waiting. He had been in this house for over a year now. And for the first couple of months, it was really just an ordinary job just to help an old man and a young woman completely unfit for life. But then when he found out what riches this family had and was hiding, everything changed. He realized that this was his chance, and he was not going to miss it now. The main thing was to act carefully now. He must not make the same mistakes as before, and then he would be fully rewarded. Mom fell asleep, Catherine said. She went back into the kitchen to wash the dishes. Harry, sitting at the table, once again looked at the chiseled figure. A top model would be jealous, and all this wealth. He licked his lips and smirked wryly. Catherine stood with her back to him. "I could come over now and grab her juicy, but you can't. Not now." For now he had to be a kind of knight, a gentleman, a friend in general, the very type that this old fool Selena wanted to see in him from the very beginning. He remembered her familiarizing him with her family's circumstances. Selena had spent her entire life as John's spouse, inspiration and faithful helper. Her husband was a historian, a cultural historian, and much more. In general, a man of science. But in the 90s, when the surrounding reality was changing rapidly, he also engaged in the trade in antiques and simply luxury goods. The couple had a daughter, Naomi, but she passed away in a car accident, and then they, in an effort to dull the pain of loss, decided to adopt a child. And as Selena recalled, fate itself smiled on them, for the whole region progressed case when two teenagers, fleeing from the house where they were tortured, ran and almost drowned in the river. Selena was in shock when she saw on TV a picture of Catherine. She was not too much, but still subtly similar to their own daughter. And she and her husband did everything to adopt her. And they did not care that after the fall into the river, when she was literally on a hair's breadth from death, she was picked up by fishermen who had taken refuge on the shoal from the storm. Catherine changed. Specialists said that it was the shock so hit the psyche. First time the girl behaved withdrawn, was silent, and almost did not move. It turned out that she now also suffers from amnesia. But since the memories of life in the orphanage were affected, it was decided that this loss is not great. After all, Catherine was now starting a new and completely prosperous life. John and Selena were supporters of home education, and so Catherine went to school only for exams. To the delight of her elderly parents, she was a homely, modest, quiet girl. It seemed that she does not need anything in the whole world. It is good with them. She loved to read. Good. John owned a luxury library. Catherine turned out to be a talented special. John admired how passionately she absorbed knowledge of art. After graduation, there was no question where Catherine should go to. Naturally, to the same university where John had studied in his time. And again, it was not the usual education, but more home, that is, correspondence form. Elderly spouses continued to rejoice. What a daughter they have. While other girls of her age are spinning novels and nonsense engaged in, she studies or in the garden helps, and even at home something to do, can read books. Clever girl, clean girl, a joy to her parents. But then something happened that the second time turned Catherine's life. One day in late fall, she asked her parents for an excursion on the river-floated ship. In general, Selena did not want to let her go. Was a bad feeling. But Catherine suddenly jumped up, said that she is already big. In general, there was a rare family scandal. The weather that day deteriorated rapidly. And pleasure boat, caught in a storm, it did not go down. But Catherine was unlucky. She fell overboard. She was rescued. But she suffered a clinical death. And then the old man's heart gave out. John died, as Selena said, worried about her granddaughter. And after that, Catherine changed. The girl decided that she was to blame for her father's death. And she closed more than before. Now the outside world saw her as a terrible threat. Catherine refused to work in an art gallery and began to earn money by writing articles on art, including in English, French, Italian, and German. She counseled students who wanted to prepare for such subjects as philosophy, history, sociology. In general, there were plenty of opportunities to earn money, but there were now difficulties in everyday life. The house required a master's hand, and Selena's health was getting worse. She could not go to the store, and Catherine also could not. They tried to order delivery of food, but suddenly Selena realized, and the delivery man is probably looking at the fact that there are two single women living in the house. He might be a thief himself, or a tip-off for other scoundrels. Besides, Selena feared that she was getting worse with her mind, forgetting the simplest things. She could confuse tea and coffee in the kitchen or salt and sugar. Therefore, she decided that she and Catherine urgently need a smart assistant, and such a person was found in one, it seems, very decent firm, which provided services of caregivers and other necessary people. And that's how Harry came to this house. And he quickly realized that this was his El Dorado. Evan returned to the restaurant, but walked around at a loss until deep into the evening. "You wanted to see me?" Lucy came into his office. "If you are free, we can talk about my offense." The girl finished in a whisper. "About what?" Evan asked absent-mindedly, who couldn't get Catherine out of his head. "Are you going to fire me?" Lucy asked through a sniffle. "No." Evan shouted, "Just go back to your job." "But you want me to tell you off, girl?" he asked sternly. "Or are you asking for some kind of punishment? Get out of my sight." "Got it? Oh, thank you so much. Thank you from the bottom of my heart." Oh, that's it. That's it. I'm leaving. Lucy chirped and ran out the door. The next day, Evan had a day off. No, Kitty, not today, he told Christine. Taking the phone away from his ear, he waited out the flood of her whining. Right now, Evan was on his way to Selena and Catherine's house. He decided that he had to talk, and it was better to start with polite words like, "We were in the same orphanage, remember?" "Well, even if you don't remember, maybe we could have a cup of coffee together." On the front passenger seat was a bouquet of flowers, gorgeous, candy pink roses. Evan went back to his conversation with his mistress for a moment to tell her to have fun tonight, honey, on your own. Go to the beauty parlor again or whatever you usually do to kill time. He pressed the intercom buttons again and was glad to hear Catherine's voice. She was surprised that he had arrived, but opened the gate. But when Evan ran up the steps and the door was open, he was in for an unpleasant surprise. "I don't get it, man." Harry looked frowning and even more outright dislike. "What do you want?" "I need to talk to the landlady, Catherine," Evan replied calmly. "About what?" "Do employees like this, have the authority to ask such questions?" Evan squinted. He didn't have to deal with caregivers and other such characters often in his life, but it seemed to him that this guy was getting into the wrong business. Harry was about to open his mouth, but then Catherine appeared over his shoulder. She was once again as radiant and beautiful as ever, today in a white dress with black polka dots. "Hello, my mother and I were just thinking of you today," she smiled. "And here I am." Evan smiled back and held out a bouquet. "This is for you." "Thank you." Catherine buried her chiseled nose in the flowers, her eyelashes fluttered. "Come in. Mom is resting now." The doctor came, prescribed sedatives and sleeping pills. Catherine took Evan to the kitchen, put tea and offered to treat him to some cakes. "Harry, thank you. You're free for the day." Evan was triumphant that the guy would leave now and stay out of the way, but he seemed to have a temper. "The window on the veranda is loose from the storm. I'll take a look at it and fix it if I can. I'm free tonight," he said, and he was staring at Evan in a way that said, "I'm not going anywhere to follow you." But at least Harry was out of the kitchen. Over tea, we got to talking. Catherine talked about their simple, secluded life and how she was currently working on a piece about the Queen Victoria Museum. Evan was really curious, but he was also yawning from the abundance of clever facts. He talked about how he works in a restaurant, and then he decided to. "Catherine, tell me, you don't remember me at all?" "No," she shook her head, blinked a lot. "Have we met before?" "A long time ago." He inhaled and exhaled deeply as if preparing to jump into a pool from a height. "We were in the same orphanage and—" Catherine stood up abruptly, so that the legs of the chair with a nasty sound traveled across the floor. She raked the dishes from the table and unloaded them into the sink. "I don't like to remember that time. There really wasn't much good back then. But one thing for sure was you. Remember when we were friends? You helped me to prepare for every exam history test. Catherine, don't you remember me at all?" It was late. The girl stood slouched and spoke dryly, even sternly, but it seemed to him that the feelings inside her were quite different. "If you don't mind, Mom needs to rest, and I still have to work." "Yes, of course," Evan sighed. The time was barely past noon, but he got the hint. What he couldn't understand was Catherine's strange aloofness. Was she imagining it, or was she remembering him for real right now? But why is she acting like this? Does she blame him for what happened back then? But they were just kids then. The Catherine he knew, he would have loved to meet again. After all, they meant so much to each other. But right now, Evan knew he had to leave. They said a polite goodbye. Already at the car, Harry approached him again. "You know, man, you better not come here again. First of all, I have a name, and secondly," Evan gave Harry an arrogant look. He knew he was good at it, and he knew he could take a lot of people down with a look like that. "Secondly, I don't think you have any right to be in charge of this place. You're just sort of a nurse, right? So have a good night. Did you fix the window?" Evan got in his car and drove off. He really didn't like that Harry guy. He definitely needed to find out more about him. He also needed to think about how to get around him so that he could continue talking to Catherine freely. In fact, it would be possible to go straight ahead, but Evan feared that this Harry was really capable of having some psychological influence on two lonely females. Who knew? Maybe he was a fraud. and it was to be found out as soon as possible. Harry gave the car a gloomy look. A rich, arrogant, greedy man. The kind of man who gets everything in life at the snap of his fingers. But what he already thought was rightfully his. Harry wasn't about to give up. He went back inside. Why did he come? He asked Catherine. Just, she shrugged. To talk. He shouldn't come here anymore, said Harry. Why? Just, it's weird, don't you think? He saved Mom and then, Harry, we'll figure it out on our own. Please. Catherine? He raised his voice a little bit. Look, I've already spent so much time with you, and I just can't let anything bad happen to you. You know, Harry paced the kitchen thoughtfully and stopped beside the girl, who was already putting the dishes in the cupboard. When I first got here, I thought that your family, you're very different from the others. I remember your mom talking about how the world around you could be dangerous, how you talked about the same thing. You know, I exist in it every day, and I can tell you that it really is, Catherine. She turned around. She gasped because he was too close, invading her personal space, and his hand lightly wrapped around her slim stance. I just want to take care of you. You're right, the world outside is dangerous. You're an extraordinary girl. You've suffered so much in this life, but you deserve better. Harry, fragile palms pressed against his chest, trying to put distance between them. Let me go, please. He nodded and obeyed. Yes, he let her go now. But this time she let him so much more than before, and he had no doubt that it wouldn't be long before. And then, Catherine would belong to him. They would be married. And then, he would get rid of the old woman. And maybe one event will even happen a little earlier than the other. In any case, he will soon get what should belong to him. And then he'll start a completely different life. And Catherine, well, she is a tidbit. With her, it will be possible to have a nice fun. And maybe he will even keep her with him. If she will be obedient, good girl. Satisfied with these musings for the day, Harry finally left. After all, he had other things of his own to do. Catherine was in a strange, previously unknown to her confusion. Why this Evan reminded her of the time when she lived in the orphanage. She remembered almost nothing from it, so scraps, as if torn to shreds, black and white old photos. Her parents always told her that her past was not important. And she also knew that in that past something very bad happened to her. And now it began to seem to her that this mysterious Evan had something to do with it. Catherine suddenly felt like a little girl who was afraid of the creaking floorboards in the old house, because it could be the same sounds that the monster was coming out of the closet or cellar. And now it seemed to Catherine that the monster, which she had avoided for so many years, was ready to come back for her. Evan would have spent the second night without sleep, tormented by various thoughts, but the decision came to him unexpectedly when he turned on the background to listen to a podcast about the novelties of restaurant fashion in France. It was an advertisement which offered to spend a weekend, vacation, or any other time renting a country cottage. Evan almost jumped up and immediately rushed to call this realtor. Despite the late hour, he answered and immediately turned to the database of options, and then voiced that yes, in the cottage village named by Evan is indeed offered for long and short-term rental of several houses. Great. Tomorrow we need to go to the viewing. Bring the contract, Evan ordered. I'm ready to sign everything on the spot. It took him the whole second weekend to go to the place, to sign the contract, and to pack the minimum necessary things at home. But by the end of the day, Evan was already in his new house. It would take him much longer to get to work from here, but at the same time, he had a legal way to be close to Catherine. Living in the neighborhood isn't the perfect cover. He and Catherine sought each other the next morning. The girl went out on the porch to admire the view, and the sun was rising beautifully that morning. Evan had gotten up early because he was suffering from insomnia. Hi, he said and waved to her. Hello, answered Catherine, and on her face read surprise. Evan commented on the fact that he was standing on the territory of the neighboring plot. Moreover, in this particular place, the plots were separated not by a high wrought iron fence, but by a low brick fence, along which bushes were also lushly grown. He rented the house, and we thought it would be empty forever, smiled Catherine. Evan nodded. He had deliberately chosen this one because it was the closest to Selena's house, and it was not even a mansion, but a good but still modest house. And it was in a very sad state. That is, it was habitable, but without all the gloss and comfort that the inhabitants of such places were used to. The realtor, who had known Evan for a long time, was shocked by his choice. "Can I ask you a question?" Evan began cautiously. "But you don't have to answer, of course. Why don't you leave the house?" Catherine clasped her hands together in front of her, intertwined her fingers. It was obvious she was worried. I noticed yesterday and more, in general, stopped here in the local store and, no, there is not gossip. But while I bought everything, I was asked where I will live, found out that near your house and here, said, I cannot," sighed Catherine. I can. It's hard to explain. Downstairs, everything beyond my house, there's like a barrier. Can you physically feel it?" Evan didn't think Catherine was crazy, but from the observations that were available to him, he had to admit that his charming grown-up childhood friend had some serious psychological problems. It seemed to be some kind of disorder, a phobia. "No," Catherine smiled guiltily, "but if I try to get off, I'll be completely scared. It's called a panic attack," she finally said with a sense of dignity. "Mom says there's nothing wrong with it, but it's so beautiful here," Evan said. And then he did what had just occurred to him and climbed over the fence. "The sun is shining. The ground is warm, the grass. You know, when we were younger, you and I used to love to walk barefoot." "Really?" Catherine rounded her eyes. "Of course. And such a place on a day like this would definitely walk up and down." Evan rolled up his pants, took off his shoes and socks. In general, he had not gone barefoot outside the apartment for 100 years, unless you counted the beach. But now he acted almost instinctively. He walked leisurely past the porch, and then extended his hand to Catherine and smiled broadly. "Come and join us." She laughed. Then she frowned, thoughtful. "Believe me, nothing bad will happen to you if you do. I'll be there for you." She turned back to the house, as if her mother or some other strict adult might pop out of it, who wouldn't allow such an outrageous prank. And then she carefully took off her shoes, pulled off her socks, and went downstairs. Catherine's bare feet sank to the sun-warmed dry earth. Her palm rested in Evan's hand. "This is just wonderful." "I told you," he smiled. And then they went for a walk, just walking through the garden. Catherine was squinting at the sun, breathing deeply, her cheeks flushed and her eyes shining. Evan talked to her about little things. Then they talked about the garden and the house. Catherine shared how much she loved the place and how much it had always meant to her parents. Evan suggested that maybe he should go to his house to get lemonade. And Catherine agreed. He brought lemonade and a couple other slices of pizza he had ordered for delivery in the morning. They sat down right on the grass and had a snack. And then Catherine suddenly opened up and told about why she stopped leaving the house. And judging by her story, Evan realized one important thing she did not remember the first time she drowned in the river as a teenager. "It's not your fault. It's not your fault." That's all he said, and she looked him in the eyes. "Sometimes I think that too. Sometimes I think Daddy, he'd want me to go on with my life, to make me happy. He was an amazing man." And she talked about John, his passion for history and art, about how he had almost lost all the family savings in the 90s, but only thanks to his ingenuity had saved them. And about how he often joked that he had bought luxury items of gold and silver and hidden them here somewhere, either in the house or in the neighborhood. Hidden then, in the 90s to dashing people, that is, bandits did not rob. And often while Catherine grew up, John liked to joke that here she grows up, he will be her one day to marry her, here, and she will have a dowry, just like the Serena. "That's the kind of daddy I had," a storyteller finished the story. Catherine suddenly heard from the house, and the girl sitting next to Evan woke up. "Oh, Mom woke up. I have to feed her breakfast, and in general, I'll go." She jumped up, smiling at him. "Thank you for the walk. It was magical." Evan waved after her. It was really magical. In fact, his whole life had changed in a few days in ways he'd never imagined. "You again?" That was the question Harry asked, or rather growled at Evan. He had come to visit his wards according to the established schedule, and he was not at all happy to see again the man in whom inexplicably Hal, but increasingly felt a threat to his plans. "Me again. Good afternoon," Evan answered politely. "I told you. To begin with, I don't remember why any outsider would have the right to run my life. Evan grinned harshly. And besides, I live here now. What? Harry rolled his eyes. Renting a house. That doesn't seem to be against the law. Have a good day. Evan threw and then climbing over the fence again, headed for his house. But then he stopped, looking over his shoulder. And by the way, I intend to communicate with Catherine and Selena as long as I want to myself and as long as they agree. And your opinion? Well, what does it even matter? You're just support staff. Who, by the way, interestingly enough, allow themselves too much. Yes, he added thoughtfully. Catherine and Selena would definitely need to talk about that. But no matter how busy Evan was with his new business, he couldn't leave Velvet's management aside. But for the first time, he felt with all his being how much the business of running this upscale restaurant absorbed his energies. Once he dreamed that his work would be creative. No, he understood that in such a business is impossible without routine, and yet he was extremely dependent on the will and opinion of Mr. Walker. He had a colossal responsibility. He had to do everything the way it should be done and not otherwise. But at the same time, Evan had a lot of new things going on in his life. He began to visit Catherine and Selena almost every day. He and Catherine had a similar interest in good cooking, and he was very happy to teach her how to cook. And then, of course, he was always invited to stay to taste everything they had prepared together. Fortunately, Evan didn't cross paths with Harry on most of his visits. But even when he did, it seemed to him that the boy had gone soft. He was doing exactly what he was supposed to do, like taking Selena's blood pressure, giving her IVs, and bringing her medication. But at some point, Evan took away some of his duties and suggested to Catherine that he could bring them all the groceries because it was not a problem for him to pick up something in the city or order delivery. Catherine was embarrassed at first, but then agreed. They talked more and more. She still did not remember almost anything from the time they spent in the orphanage, but it seemed that some memories began to awaken, and Evan sadly noticed that the mental state of Catherine's foster mother was deteriorating almost every day. And he thought about the fact that perhaps it was necessary to provide this old woman with counseling, examination, and treatment from highly qualified specialists in the best clinics. He could arrange it. It remained only to persuade Catherine to do so, because so far, that is, from the first time, she decisively and even resentfully rejected such a proposal. And then something happened that threatened to destroy everything that Evan had worked so hard to create in his communication with Catherine. It happened when, one day, Catherine got so much courage that she decided to walk to his house. She was excited and knocked on the door. She wore a very pretty sundress white and daisies, and she was at a loss when the door was opened to her by Christy. "Well, who are you, the cleaning lady?" Evan's friend asked. She was wearing a scarlet jumpsuit and a sea of gold jewelry. I'm not the cleaning lady," Catherine said, batting her eyelashes. "I'm his roommate." Wow, Christy stretched out, curling her lips. She suddenly thought, hadn't Evan suddenly decided to move out of town for this girl? He hadn't been paying much attention to her lately. He'd become so brooding. Christy quickly assessed her rival. She was not young, not a student, yes, but she had a fresh face. It looked like she neglected the services of beauticians and had everything natural, a kind of pastoral simple girl, and even had a waist-length braid. But Christy was a girl with a rich escort past and knew from personal experience that sometimes it is the quiet ones who look like piranha teeth. "Okay, listen up." She grabbed her potential rival under the elbow with her manicure hand. "Evan is my man. I don't know what you're fantasizing about, but you better stay away from him. Do you understand? Or I'm gonna make your life miserable." "And who are you to him in general?" asked Catherine, almost crying. "I am his mistress. We are in love. We will soon be married. That's it. Get out of here." Having said that, she just slammed the door in front of Catherine's nose. And she stood a little, suddenly shook, and barely looking under her feet, rushed back to her home. How painful, how scary. She had gone out into the world again, and the world had hurt her again. And this Evan guy, he was just messing with her, right? Harry was right when he said that she wasn't even a woman, but a stupid girl who needed to be protected and kept safe or she'd be lost. "Who was that?" Evan asked. He had just been on the phone, or rather arguing with one of Velvet's suppliers, so he had missed it. Christy shook her hair and smiled. A neighbor lady asked if we wanted to buy some steamed milk. Well, I replied that no. Evan nodded. He really didn't trust farmers eat private products in terms of quality because he had once poisoned himself with curd from the market. Christy, we need to talk. Actually, he really wanted to talk to his mistress, who suddenly came to him late last night. But first, he decided to postpone it for the morning because he had a terrible headache, and then he was distracted. It was a tough conversation. Christy cried and threw everything at him. She refused to recognize the fact that they were breaking up. But then when she realized that it was over, she simply told Evan that he was a cheapskate and not a man at all, wished him to go to hell, and ran out of the house. She got into a foreign car, which, by the way, he had rented for her, and drove away. Evan thought that he was very lucky that Catherine had not had time to get acquainted with Christy, and he also decided that tomorrow, as soon as he would sort out all the restaurant's affairs, he would have a serious talk with Catherine about everything, about their past, and more importantly about their future. A few days ago, Evan decided to do it. He found out Harry's last name from Catherine and went to a good private detective to gather all possible information about this guy. And what did you find out? He asked when he got the call late in the evening. Evan was in his city apartment and was about to go to bed. But after he looked at the messages sent to him, all sleep was gone, because the picture that was revealed was simply horrible. It turned out that Harry didn't just work for one firm that provided caregivers and other such professionals. He worked for others, but he was kicked out because he violated every conceivable standard of behavior. For example, he tried to swindle money from some of his gullible elderly clients. And once he tried to pretend to be the dead grandson of a grandmother who she thought was demented and not dead at all. So Harry hoped to make her sign a deed of gift for the apartment. Besides, it turned out that this Harry, when he was in a relationship with several girls, also extorted money from them and also spread his hands. Evan read all this with clenched teeth. He realized that Catherine had trusted a real monster and she and her old mom were in great danger. There was no telling what terrible thing this man was up to. And Evan didn't doubt that Harry was up to something bad because he was trying so hard to drive him away. He was literally radiating aggression. Evan decided he would sleep for a few hours and then he would go to Catherine and have a serious talk with her. He would tell her the whole truth. Although, what am I waiting for? Evan said to himself, dialing Catherine's phone number. Yes, she answered, and from her tone, he realized she was crying. What do you want? I hate you. Hearing this, Evan was confused and asked what was wrong. And then Catherine, emotionally sobbing, pouring out all her pain, told that it became known to her that he had a girlfriend. No, said Catherine. She realizes that there is nothing between them. But, why did he play with her? For what did he make her feel needed? Did it give him such a perverse pleasure to tame her like that? And then he wanted to abandon her or maybe even use her in the most perverse way. Marry me, Catherine, he said, slowly approaching his victim. What? Catherine exhaled. You will be my wife. Did not ask already, but purely stated the fact, Harry. Tomorrow your mom will be taken to a boarding school, and we will apply for marriage registration. Catherine, he raised his voice sternly. You must understand, you can't take care of your mother or yourself. Yes, you are even out of the house and the store cannot go out. Catherine suddenly did something she had never allowed herself to do with Harry before. What was it? She's never treated people like that before. She slapped him in the face. I'm not crazy. Harry froze. His cheeks stung like fire. It was also humiliating. There was a quiet rustle of a belt being removed from his pants. You little bitch, I'll show you how to disobey your husband. Catherine's eyes widened. Something was happening in her brain. It seemed to her that the world around her began to rotate at an insane speed. In her mind burst out long-buried memories. She was very young. The pain of being slapped on the back. Fear, despair, escape. She had run away from the pain then. Harry brought his hand up. The belt whistled through the air. Catherine tried to dodge with a squeal, but the belt still hit her shoulder. And that was the last straw. The girl's consciousness shattered like wood struck by lightning, and she threw herself away from the house. Evan didn't care what the weatherman said. He didn't care that he himself was sleep-deprived, tired, and angry. Right now, he had only one task: to keep his eyes on the road, pressing down on the gas pedal. He was driving to a cottage community. There was uneasiness in his heart. Thanks to the fact that he was renting a house in the neighborhood, he no longer had to wait to be let through the gate. It was enough to get into his own and then take the familiar route over the fence to Selena's property. Evan ran up onto the porch. Why was the door open? "Catherine? Catherine," he called out. It looked like the weather had gotten so bad that even the power had gone out in an emergency. In the darkness, Evan ran into someone. "Oh, it's you," a figure whispered in the darkness, and he realized it was Harry and he was drunk. "She ran away. What a bitch. Where's Catherine? What did you do to her, you asshole?" Evan grabbed Harry by the scruff of the neck and shoved him against the nearest wall. "Here, you say," the boy drunkenly hiccuped. "What did these broads want? What does she want with you? Because you got the money. Ah, right. She ran away. I just wanted to teach her a little, as a future wife." Harry chuckled drunkenly and then tried to punch Evan, but only got a glancing blow to the jaw. Evan let him go squeamishly. Catherine had run away. Where could a young woman run to on a stormy night when she rarely left the house in recent years? And then it dawned on him, well, of course, the same place where she ran and last time, fleeing from beatings in the same night. His heart was no longer clenched from the anxious foreboding, but the realization of impending disaster was tearing him apart. Evan rushed out of the house. It was lucky, oh lucky, that he had a good memory for maps and remembered which way the river was and where there was a bridge. He'd heard about this phenomenon on a science program. When a person in an extreme and extremely traumatic situation begins to act in a way similar to what he's done in the past, Evan could swear that Catherine was doing exactly that now. And one could only hope that today's bridge was not like that flimsy one from the past. One could only hope that she was not completely crazy, and nothing would happen to her. Evan didn't understand how, but literally on the fly, he managed to pull a smartphone out of his pocket and dialed the right number to call for help in the house where there was an inadequate drunken stranger and a helpless elderly woman whom he probably intended to harm. Catherine, it was a sure as hell not a good idea to try to call anyone in this weather. But Evan just couldn't act completely sane, rational, serious right now. It was like he was partially insane himself. There's the bridge. It really wasn't the same one. That bridge was much wider, more reliable, stronger. But was it just a glimpse of a fragile female figure on it, or was it really a flash of lightning? Having stumbled several times in the mud and lost one shoe in the sticky, thick sludge, Evan finally reached the bridge. Catherine, she was standing there, shivering, her face contorted with hysteria, and the rain mingled with her tears. Evan froze. Catherine, as if some curse was hanging over her, was standing just in the part of the bridge where part of the railing was missing. The slabs seemed to have been made by today's hurricane. The wooden bridge, it must have seemed to the inhabitants of the cottage village as a nice pastoral detail that adorned their landscape in good weather. But now everything had changed. Catherine, it's me. Stay away. Catherine squealed and cried again. Catherine, my dear, it's me, your Evan. Do you remember? Remember? The orphanage, you and I. He stopped and spread his arms as if inviting her to dive into this protective embrace. Honey, careful. Catherine, we've been through this before. You are scared, I understand, but I will not let you offend. That's what he said. I'm not him, Evan said. Catherine, I love you. Remember, Catherine, do you remember that day when we ran together and then parted forever? The young woman froze. Her face took on an impenetrable expression as she struggled to remember, and then her eyes opened. She remembered. Catherine, come to me. Let's go home. I'll take care of you and your mom. It seemed to Evan that she was ready to take a step towards him, to trust him. But at that moment, the heavens were torn apart by lightning again, then thunder rumbled, and then the wind hit the bridge, lightning again, and just the part on which Catherine was standing suddenly collapsed downwards. The young woman's screaming was drowned in the rumble. Evan rushed forward. He saw the river carrying its fruitlessly floundering prey, and he quickly made a decision and jumped down himself. In late summer and in this weather, the water was icy cold. How did his heart not stop? Evan breathed dirty water. heavy from the suspension of sand lifted from the bottom, coughed, but kept afloat. Now he turned his head. Where's Catherine? Here flashed a spot of her dress, and he, barely moving his arms and legs, but began to move forward. Come on, just a little more. Was it just a fancy, or did she disappear under the water this time for much longer? No, he could be late. It would be too unfair. It just couldn't happen. Evan felt a little more and he wouldn't last. His body would just betray him. And the current of the river would pick them up, swirl them around, and take them into its destructive embrace, finally. But he finally closed his arms around Catherine. She was so heavy. Because she was unconscious, Evan realized where to get the strength to reach the shore. There it is, so close. It would be a shame not to swim to the shore, and somehow he swam to the shore. It seemed that the river itself at some point helped, and its surging wave pushed out two bodies. Catherine. Catherine. Evan realized his phone was hopelessly disconnected after such a swim. He just cannot get through to the rescuers and say where they are now exactly now. And from the cottage village they were carried away by a decent Catherine, honey, well, open your eyes. He held her in his arms and did not understand how it happened. By what laws of the universe it happened that barely found, he again has to lose her. Why did he have to do this? Did he do so much evil in this life? But it's not fair. Okay, he's a bad, just a terrible person. He kicked out an old lady from the restaurant. But why did he do that to Catherine? The last thing she remembered was two things. Memories came to her of who was her best friend, of how they had run away together and what had happened then. And then came the water. It drew, tormented, twisted, and pulled her down. She heard it calling her. She wanted to respond, but the strength of her and the elements, they were unequal. And then she just got tired of fighting. But what happened now? Catherine was sleepily surprised to realize that she was warm and dry. Her body ached, but she was lying on something soft and relaxed. And also, no, it did not seem to her at all, but the sun was shining in her eyes. She moaned softly and shook her head. Catherine? A familiar voice sounded above her. Wake up, dear. Oh, the sun in the window, yes? Now, I'll cover. Doctor. The voice withdrew a little. She's awake. Catherine. Now that she finally opened her eyes, she saw a man in a doctor's dress. How are you feeling? Nothing. Nothing. The doctor nodded and smiled encouragingly at her. Well, that's good. And then he spoke. Briefly, professionally, but accessible. He explained to her that she spent almost 24 hours unconscious, then barely coming to herself. The body received a serious hypothermia. There were huge risks, but fortunately, everything was fine. But not without, of course, without sprains and bruises. And there was also suspected concussion. I remember, said Catherine. I remember everything. I was told, the doctor glanced at the event, that you suffered from amnesia for many years, and you started to remember something. It's an amazing case. My mom. Catherine looked at me pleadingly. What's wrong with her? She's fine, the doctor replied. Selena's condition is not alarming, but I must say that. The doctor stopped talking because Evan gently poked him with his elbow. Don't worry a man now. He's been through enough. No, I want to know, stubbornly insisted Catherine. I must know. And then the doctor explained. He said that for a long time Selena received absolutely wrong decision, seriously damaging her both physical and mental state. It's Harry, Catherine said. Am I understanding correctly, it's him. That night, he wanted me too. I was afraid to think badly of him at first, but then I kept feeling there was something dark about him. That's right, Evan said. I hired a private investigator. He seemed suspicious and it all checked out. Harry, when they found him, he was even drunker. And he had the nerve to brag about what he'd done. He confessed to everything. But he won't hurt us anymore, will he? He will never come to our house again, sighed Catherine, and then covered her eyes. I'm sorry, I'm tired. You really best to rest now, Catherine, said the doctor. He left the room with Evan. They talked about what kind of treatment both Catherine and her mother would need in the near future. Evan said that he would take care of everything. But for the time being, of course, there was no question of moving Catherine and her mother to a private clinic. And besides, they were very well taken care of in the hospital. But Evan was still fussing. carrying the packages, including all sorts of goodies, for which, by the way, he was scolded a couple of times by the doctor. Get it? He told him off like a little boy. Exotic fruits and chocolates, that's not the best choice right now. Well, I just wanted to make her happy, Evan sighed. Finally, the day came when Catherine and Selena could return to their home. Evan realized that perhaps he was taking on too much, but he had secured Catherine's support and consent beforehand, and arranged everything so that the house was cleaned by a special cleaning company, as well as the necessary small repairs. Evan also ordered work in the garden, removed all the weeds and dry grass, renewed the paths. On part of the flower beds near the house planted already grown up and blooming plants velvets. And at the same time as all of this, big changes were happening in Evan's professional life. Just one day, Mr. Walker himself came to Velvet and said that he had two pieces of news. And the first one is not very good because he thinks that his subordinate, that is Evan, can work with much more dedication. The second news was good according to Mr. Walker himself, and it was that she intended to really open a restaurant in Monaco. If you prove yourself worthy, then I think I could use you there, he said, sitting back in his leather armchair. I'm very grateful to you, Evan replied. You know, I've been waiting for this for years. I've imagined it many times, but I have to decline your offer. And I quit. Mr. Walker was shocked. He demanded an explanation. However, Evan didn't want to give him all the details, so he limited himself to the general phrase that family circumstances demanded it. The superiors were not happy, but consent was granted. Evan breathed a sigh of relief. Yes, he had not taken this step easily, but he couldn't do otherwise. Too much was already different in his life. Too much was going to change in the future. His savings right now was enough to open his own business, for example, a small cafe. And of course, Evan was no longer renting that mansion next to Selena's house. Now he could go there whenever he wanted and for as long as he wanted without any cover. After a while, when Selena was feeling much better, they talked. Evan confessed what he had once been to Catherine and honestly revealed his future plans for her. Selena listened to him very carefully. I'm glad that my girl will now have someone to look after her. Evan was truly grateful to her. He was about to leave the old woman's room, but she called out to him. As for the other day, she said with a smile. Consider it selectively forgotten, she winked at him. And Evan blushed with shame. He was still sickened by his past self, who had been capable of such an act. But he was also truly grateful to Zena for being willing to let go of the past. Evan didn't want to rush things. He realized that his and Catherine's lives had been very different. They had grown up to be very different people, but at the same time he couldn't help but admit that he couldn't imagine his life without this girl, and that's why they had to talk. He found the girl on the porch. She was sitting on the bottom step, her bare feet touching the ground. How are you? He asked and was immediately embarrassed by such a trivial question. It was hardly suitable for starting a serious romantic conversation. Nothing, Catherine answered. You know, I want to thank you again. It's unnecessary, really, Evan smiled. It's not like I did anything wrong. You saved me. That's, well, yes, saved. But, Catherine, I think I'm a fool. And why do you think so? She spoke as if in a serious tone, but her eyes were smiling at the same time. Because I've been planning this conversation for a long time, and now all the words are out of my head. So put them back together. That's easy to say. Then say it like this, it'll work. He realized she was right. She was 1,000 times right. And he started talking about how he loves her, about how he wants to spend the rest of his life with her, about how he wants to build a new happy life with her. And the fact that Catherine was rubbing the hem of her dress in her fingers today. It was dark green. That I'm crazy. Doesn't it embarrass you? You are not crazy. Evan strongly objected and gently intercepted her hand and squeezed it reassuringly in his fingers. I think everyone has a period in their life when it's easier to shut themselves off. It's normal to shut down. It's just that it's a little long, but it's not your fault. And if you'll just let me, I want to take your hand and take you with me, wherever you want to go. Do you really love me so much? She smiled slyly, her eyes shining with tenderness. But why? What's so special about me? I can't answer that question, he said. At least not so fast. There's just you, the girl I dream about. And I'm an idiot. Already planned our lives, and maybe I'm more just a friend and you are not ready to see me as your husband. You are for me the whole world. Catherine brought her face close to his. She looked into his eyes and seemed to look straight into his soul. And I am ready to stretch out my hand to you and follow you anywhere.